Welcome to the Tuesday Review. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
I'm Callum.
And tonight it's a very special episode. We're joined by a very special guest, my dad, Andre. How you going, Dad?
Hey, how are you? Thanks for inviting me.
No, that's all right. You invited yourself because...
Well, after how many episodes?
Because when we had the old show, what was that, like 3 years we did that? And then we've been doing this show
Mr.
for a year.
Mr. calls the shots.
Yeah, it's like he's like, oh, I need to come on the show. And I'm like, yeah. And then like we rebooted the show a year ago. And then it's like, oh yeah, I still need to come on the show. I'm like, yeah. So now we're finally doing it. It's going to be an epic episode because tonight we're talking about Sci-Fi Classics. Mainly from like pre-1980 sci-fi classics that my dad grew up with and that he introduced me to and that got me interested in sci-fi and movies in general. And then we'll see how time goes. We'll see where we'll end up, and then maybe next week we'll come back and talk about some of the newer movies. But yeah, we'll just start off and go year by year throughout the history of sci-fi movies and pick out the classics. It's a huge list that I've compiled. I had to cut out 70 movies just for time, or we're just going to focus on either like really famous movies or like really important movies or movies that are important to us, like personally. Otherwise, there's like so many movies we just don't have time to mention. So if you're listening and you're like, oh, what about this movie? What about this movie? At one point, it probably was on my list, but I had to cut it out just, for the sake of time or whatever. So first off, quickly, I want to mention Metropolis, 1927, because I just think that's a really important movie.
Technically important movie.
Yeah. Just Fritz Lang, like, masterpiece.
Got it on Blu-ray, never seen it.
Watch it, it's great.
I'll wait till I get the projector and see.
Yeah, I've got like 3 different copies of that movie. Like, it's amazing. And especially because when people think sci-fi, they don't think silent movies. Yeah. And this is like one of the first big kind of sci-fi movies.
Famously used I'm going to butcher the word, the Schuften process to
What's
make,
that?
like, they used mirrors and stuff to make actors look like they were on a really large set. Like, it was sort of like the special effects sequences. It was like the first time they'd used that kind of
like
effect.
Putting the people into the matte painting or whatever.
Exactly, yeah. They used like the actual actor, it was like a cardboard giant set cutout with a circle in.
Yeah.
And they put the actor in there at the point, and they used mirrors and trickery to make it look like he was a part of that set.
Yeah.
And it was like the first time that anyone had ever seen anything like that.
Yeah, it's a really great movie, and I recommend people watch it, especially because a lot of people, not only are they afraid of black and white movies, silent movies that freak them out. But if you're into sci-fi, you have to check out Metropolis. Second, we want to quickly mention Things to Come, because that's one that's important to Dad, 1936. It's one he's mentioned to me a few times before. What's funny is that it's based on a H.G. Wells story, and I think one of the reasons H.G. Wells wanted to make a Things to Come movie is because he hated Metropolis. So he's like, I'm going to show them, and then he made Things to Come. What is interesting about Things to Come is that it's like, whereas Metropolis is like a dystopian movie, Things to Come is very much a utopian movie. It's all about the bright future.
Yeah.
And the technology, that's why it's called The Things to Come.
It was like the Tomorrowland of that time.
Yeah.
If you could sort of use the aspect of seeing the city for the first time.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the girl running around the toy shop.
Yeah, what would the future be like from the 1930 perspective? Yeah. Like everyone's wearing white like robes and there's like monorails and stuff, like all that cool stuff.
There was also kind of a look, using today's analogy, Coruscant look to it. That the high-rise buildings were quite high. The aeroplanes were very close to the buildings.
Yeah, it's almost like flying cars, but they look like airplanes.
Yeah. They were sort of flying cars, but they looked like biplanes still.
Yeah.
Because the technology of jumping into. I suppose
they were using what they had at the time for like a reference. Yeah. All right, so then we're going to just jump forward, and now we're going to do pretty much the 1950s onward. Yeah. Obviously, there are a lot of movies from the 20s, 30s, and 40s that are, sci-fi important movies, but we don't have really time to go into them. And the 50s is really where
Things start to pick up.
Yeah, sci-fi became like a thing.
Yeah.
It became really popular. and the 50s, 60s, and 70s is like Dad's era. So we're going to start with, quickly we'll talk about When Worlds Collide, 1951, because actually before, on our way to the studio, Dad he's like, I remember this movie, and it's about the world's about to end, and the people, there's like a lottery, and they had to, whoever wins gets to on a rocket ship to escape. And I looked it up, and it's When Worlds Collide. But Dad wanted to mention because of the type of rocket ship.
Well, I saw it for the first time, of course. Everything came to Australia, always many years afterwards. But I mean, I know it's a 1951 show,
you would have seen in the late 60s.
We would have, I can't remember exact date, we would have acquired our TV in the mid-60s.
Yeah.
So therefore, things would have been under movies that you saw for the first time. Whether they were syndicated in the, I know syndication is more for serials, but whether it was in the US, it would have been shown maybe several times. That was the first time we got to see it.
Yeah.
Also, as I was saying about some movies that we saw at the cinema, because the cinema would have consisted of a cartoon, a newsreel, a short film.
Yeah.
Whether it be one of these, and then the main feature.
Yeah.
The main feature,
or you get a double feature,
romance,
for and you said it was like $2. You get a double feature, newsreel, cartoon.
Yeah. Pretty much always.
What a time to be alive.
Me and Callum dream about shit like that.
And of course, then you also, because of that, you also had intermission.
Yeah.
Where you could go out and get your choc
That's
tops.
so good. I love.
Yeah, and they would advertise the fact, dancing hot dogs and what have you. So it's something that you guys probably don't get to see. I think they do show something like that on Grease.
There's a bit where they have to drive in, and there's the
intermission was also part of the entertainment.
Yeah,
and also it gave you an opportunity to go get your food,
snacks. Yeah,
and settle down for the next session of the movie.
I think we've had an intermission once. That was when we saw 2001 at the Astor.
Yeah, you guys didn't see Hateful Eight with me, did you?
No.
Yeah, we had an intermission there. Basically all the epic long movies that had an intermission when they were made. If they get replayed, they have an intermission now.
I feel like you need the intermission.
For those movies, if you're watching Spartacus or whatever, of course you need it. But if you're watching, I don't know, Iron Man 2 or whatever, it's like
Birds
you don't
of Prey.
Yeah.
No, we need an intermission for Birds of Prey.
The whole movie should be an intermission. So a lot of movies, almost all the movies we'll talk about up until a certain point, you were introduced through late 60s, TV, when it first came to Australia. You had a black and white TV, and you didn't even know some of these movies were in colour until later.
I mean, bear in mind, if I can add before we move on to the 50s onwards, is that a lot of these movies were sometimes no more than an hour long anyway. I'm not talking commercial time. So they would be the first movie prior to the main movie. So some of these I would have seen at the cinema. Yeah,
like the B movies are really the short ones.
There's a lot of B movies that, as you said, we cut out so many.
Can't even talk about half of those.
And, really, for me now, it's got to be total recall. I've got to see some of these again. When Worlds Collide, what fascinated about me to me was the lottery system. Was very clever. The rocket on the rails, which was
they shoot it up a mountain on a rail.
Yeah, on a rail system. It's the first time I ever saw that. I only saw that again recently in Tomorrowland, where they were showing that scene where they get on the rocket and it goes up a ramp.
But I feel like that might have been a thing in Things to Come as well. It's a very old school way of
propulsion.
Yeah. It's what's that? Is that Voyage to the Moon or whatever, where they shoot it out of a cannon? They shoot the rocket into the moon. It's that kind of, because they didn't even conceive of rocket engines or...
Well, also they did do a bit of a showing of that in Enterprise, the serial Enterprise.
The series,
rather, where they were launching to try to go to Warp 2.
To get extra propulsion, they had to launch it.
They launched it like that first. And then, of course, the warp engines open up and away they go. But I'm sure there's a few other movies that was in, but this was the most significant.
Yeah, that's the one that jumped out.
The drama leading up to who's going to get on this ship and who's going to give up their seat, if you will. I think Simpsons did a parody on that as well.
Yeah, they did.
So, but to me, it was very memorable at the time.
Yeah.
But,
it's a good system. I think they've also used that sort of lottery idea in, there's like a few apocalyptic disaster movies.
Yeah.
There's one where there's a giant boat and there's a lottery system.
Yeah,
and
it's 2012, I think.
Yeah. And they had to. Was that the one with John Cusack?
Yeah.
They had used a similar system in that. It's very entertaining.
Yeah, it feels like that's like
it's a cheap way to manufacture drama.
Yeah, it's like good tension, but it kind of makes sense. It's like, well, the world's ending. We can only fit 20 people on this plane.
It's kind of the fairest in a sense.
Yeah, it's like
even though you always get the rich people automatically get this.
Exactly.
Well, 2012 showed that money got them the ticket.
Or it's like a Titanic thing where it's like women and children first, and then there's a guy, Billy Zane's like, I have a kid. It's like, damn you, Billy Zane. All right, let's move on to probably one of the most important movies on this list, The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951. It's a movie that you love a lot and introduced to me when I was very young and became one of my favorite movies. It's one of the greatest sci-fi movies of all time.
Very well written.
Very well written. Has an important message.
I've never seen the original. Is it better than the remake?
We'll talk about the remake. What a joke.
Well, can we use Star Wars as an example? The last Star Wars to the first one?
It's not that drastic, but it's kind of that. Yeah,
God, it has Keanu in it.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's the best thing about it. No, but we'll talk about that. But yeah, so the original is one of the greatest sci-fi movies ever made. One of my favorites, one of your favorites, Dad. And yeah, it's just such a simple. That's what's great about sci-fi, is such a simple idea. You don't have to have a lot of flying cars and laser guns and all that. It's just like the one idea, and that's great. Like a lot of 50s movies obviously have technical limitations, so it's more about the idea.
Yeah.
The science fiction comes more from the ideas. And this is like prime example of that. And also just having a great cast and like moving really slowly and introducing you to the elements and having a profound message, which was important at the time because of the Cold War, of like, denuclearization or whatever. But now I think it still holds up. The message still holds up. I mean, it's even more important, unfortunately, that the message is just as relevant now. Yeah,
it's if you got 1% of sci-fi liking in your DNA, it's a movie that you got to watch before you die.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah.
But this is where, as we were talking many times, the story takes precedence to the visual effects. The visual effects are very, very good.
They're very especially because it's 1951. So this is still one of the earlier science fiction movies, and it still holds up really well. And the music, the theremin, the creepy, so good.
Very, very.
But we should mention the reason you love the movie is because there's a giant robot in it.
Yeah.
And
a cool saucer, a flying saucer.
Flying saucer, yeah. But spoiler alert, listeners, my dad's obsessed with like giant robot, like mechanical men.
Yeah, robots, droids.
Loves it.
Androids.
Yeah.
Yeah, probably in that cyborgs? Order.
Yeah. So just all like mechanical, boxy, like robot men. So Gort from Day the Earth Stood Still is like a big metal man, and the technology they use, he has no joints. It's all like one metal form or whatever.
Okay, so there's no
similar to
you can't see.
It always like more of a humanoid.
No. He's a humanoid. Can you Google it, Callum? Gort, Gort. So yeah, and he's got so you can't see any bolts or anything, and he's just so cool. He looks cool
when he opens up his visor and
and he disables all the weapons.
But I have to say it, that ray gun, that ray comes out of his face.
Yeah, it's cool.
Very silver.
Still, still some of the best I've seen.
It's so cool. And I also like the idea of just like the alien being just like a really polite English gentleman.
Oh, really?
I love the cast in this. I love the characters. That's a great thing. So you can have all the great special effects and stuff, but if the characters in the story aren't good, then what's the point? And Day the Earth Stood Still is just such a well-written movie.
Yeah.
And then, of course, they had to go and remake it in 2008. And it's just a soulless Hollywood cash grab. But I will say, Keanu does a good job. He plays the alien very differently from the original. He plays it more like robotic and cold. He doesn't blink the entire movie. And I also like the idea that they present in the remake of like he's there to preserve the environment and destroy all the man-made stuff. And so he's got these like orbs that absorb all the flora and fauna, while the Gort in this version of the movie kind of turns into nanites and eats up all the man-made materials. I'm like, that's a great idea. They should have made an original sci-fi film based on that, like The Ark, they could have called it, or some shit like that. Would have been great.
Yeah.
But they had to slap on a recognizable name, which, to be honest, isn't even that recognizable, especially to younger people, and make a pretty crappy movie it ended up being. It's a very inferior movie.
In a comparison, it is a crappy movie.
Yeah.
As a standalone, if it didn't have the title "The Day the Earth Stood Still," and like it was called The Ark,
and if they
Keanu special, whatever, it was not bad. I can't rubbish it all the way to the end.
It's a bad movie, but there's some good ideas in it that they should have took those ideas and made a really cool original movie. And if they did that, it probably would have been on our list as one of the great original movies of the 2000s, sci-fi movies of the 2000s. But instead, it's known as that shitty remake to one of the best sci-fi movies ever made.
Yeah.
You know? Do you want to say anything else before we move on?
No, that's fine. It's a must-see movie at least once in your lifetime. Yeah, there, whether you like it or not, but you got to see it. But it's still
very important.
We watched
film.
it just recently, and you know, I got up from the chair, if you will, and said that still stands up today. The story, the characters.
It's like engrossing. It's like captivating. You can't look away.
And yet, it's a slow movie.
It's very simple.
And simple, but sometimes they say simple is
around 35.
Yeah.
It's not like an epic or anything. It's just like a small story. But all right. So next, The Thing from Another World, 1951 as well. This and The Day the Earth Stood Still both coming out in the same year. Like the two like big sci-fi movies that showed that like sci-fi could be a thing. Like not just B movies, not just men going to the moon.
Yeah, like
it's
blockbusters.
And this was a really important movie that, of course, John Carpenter remade in 1982, which we'll talk about that probably in the 80s section, because that's an incredible movie. So the original is actually really fun, but when you get to the remake, that's a case of John Carpenter, like, you know, loving the original and like doing something different with it and making an even better movie. Then we've got The War of the Worlds, 1953, another very important, very big blockbuster.
Started as a radio play?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then they remade it with Tom Cruise.
Initially
was it a H.G. Wells story?
Yeah.
And then they did...
Wells story,
Then it started as a...
then Orson Welles did the radio play, which... famously apparently wasn't true. Like that was like a media
I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to like to think that it was.
And then they remade it with Tom Cruise.
People who came in somewhat into the radio program
who didn't know,
because he introduced that this was a fiction,
but the fact that people
came in 5 minutes later,
the stories that like people running in the streets, but apparently that's not true. But anyway,
I think it is.
So the War of the Worlds, the 1953 movie, another really important sci-fi classic, and then they remade it in 2005 with Callum Nathan's best friend.
I like Tom Cruise. This movie wasn't the best.
It's not a good movie.
It has a couple of good scenes in it.
Yeah, Spielberg made it, and it's got a couple good bits, but otherwise it's pretty shit.
It's pretty
I'm on their
rubbish.
side. I'm a Tom Cruise fan as well.
As
you know, but that's mainly from Top Gun onwards.
Yeah. This is because you like planes as well.
I do like planes. Yeah, you know, I mean, I do like. There
he
are
flies a helicopter in Mission Impossible Fallout.
Oh, you should have seen him before. He's like, "Have you seen the new Top Gun Maverick trailer?" He's like, "Oh my god, they're in the plane." I'm like, "Yeah, I know."
Yeah, I watched the extended version last night. The what do you call
the trailer
it?
feature?
There was also some interviews as well. So but very impressive. You know, being very realistic in the way.
You can't deny like he's got a death wish. Like his stunts, stunts are impressive.
But this movie, it's not. It's all right. It's not the best movie. It has a few good moments of say tension.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really like the remake version. The original. I mean,
I'm sure the original's better, but but it's not. This movie's not without the remake's not without merits.
It's not.
It's just not a great.
Yeah, it's not completely terrible. Yeah. Now here's another important one: Forbidden Planet, 1956. This is one of your favorites, Dad.
Is this a B movie?
No, I wouldn't call it a B movie.
No, probably today's standards, yes. But
yeah, I think when people look back on it, it seems cheesy and clanky, and so it's a B movie. But I think it was one of the bigger ones. It was one of the more famous, more well-known sci-fi movies. And it was in color, which is always a way to, I guess, show that's not a B movie. Oh, yeah. not necessarily, but
back then it wasn't a B movie. Yeah, it wasn't.
But one of the reasons that you love Dad is because Robbie the Robot, one of the most famous science fiction robots ever.
Yeah, and also the spaceship then started to show internal mechanisms on how it got to the planet, etc., etc. It
Lots
wasn't
of cool
just
beeping, booping lights and
unlike
switches.
Unlike say the day the Earth stood still, whereas the saucer comes down and pretty much settles.
Well, the thing that's cool about Day the Earth Stood Still is because it's in like an alien craft, and it's all seamless. Yeah. And the controls are all like touch panels, which is also quite ahead of its time.
Oh yeah, very much.
And it's all very minimalistic. Yeah. Whereas Forbidden Planet is more traditional 50s, like lots of switches and levers and like blinking lights and cool shit like that. Yeah. Where they're like, and Leslie Nielsen's the captain, and he's like, activate landing sequence. He's like boop beep boop boop, and they're like,
yeah. Also, think
this is before Leslie Nielsen was like a comedy actor. Yeah. I should mention that because Callum's like, wait, what?
Yeah, that's why it's got its B status today, is because probably now we look at,
Well, Leslie Nielsen wasn't a comedy actor until Flying High. Yeah. Like pretty much before that, he was like a serious actor. And this is like one of his big roles. He was the captain in Forbidden Planet. Yeah,
because now when you look back at it, you expect him to crack a joke. Yeah. And you don't get it.
Yeah, you wait the whole movie and you're like, what a rip-off. No, it's a really good movie, really tense, and Robbie the Robot's really cool. He's got these big bulby arms like Michelin Man, metal like little claws, and really cool.
Yeah, a lot of effort was made to make that robot, so it was, jumping way ahead of a humanoid.
I'm not sure, but I feel like they reused that robot in other movies and in B movies, and were just and they renamed it different things.
Yeah, he was used a few times,
and it became like a really famous.
It was.
Yeah. But became like a famous,
like a shared universe of like a meme.
Yeah. No, that's really it's really cool. It's one of the best sci-fi movies of the 50s. Do you want to mention anything else?
No, that's fine.
Yeah. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, 1956.
This is such a scary idea.
Absolute classic, just really tense, Cold War paranoia and all that, but also just really good, again, it's about the idea. Yeah. It's not about laser guns and stuff.
But the fact that people are getting paranoia of the time. Yeah. It's like it bleeds into the movies. Even though look at the Twilight Zone. Some of the scariest fucking shit on television, even watching today, is probably just the original Twilight Zone, right? Yeah. It's scary.
It's all about the tension and the atmosphere. Tense. Yeah. And
the idea that your loved ones, your family can be replaced by
aliens,
imposters. It's just it's up there in all-time classics.
Yeah. But what's interesting is they remade it in 1978, and it's also, the 78 version is also one of the best sci-fi movies ever. It's one of those kind of The Thing, The Fly, it's like, the 78 version is actually really, really good and doesn't just play it beat for beat. And and they also made a few different versions of that story, but they were never that good. All right, so let's get to the 60s. 1960, The Time Machine. This is another classic. This is one Dad showed me when I was younger as well. The Morlocks? They scared the shit out of me. Yeah. There's these hairy ape men who live under the ground who terrorize the Eloi. Yeah. The peaceful pacifist people who live on the surface. And it's about a 19th century scientist who builds a time machine, goes to the future, finds the Eloi living there, and the Morlocks terrorizing them, and he has to use his knowledge to help them out. Pretty awesome.
You mean his inferior past man knowledge?
Yeah, well, the thing is that they went so far into the future that the people kind of just, everything was kind of, they just live peacefully on the surface of the planet. They don't do anything. Yeah. They don't have any knowledge. Yeah. And he's like, what the hell? What are people doing here? You're getting terrorized by these monsters. You're not doing anything about it. And they're like, no, we're just peaceful. We'll just hang out.
If you watch the sequence of the actual time machine going through the motions for the first time, and getting to where he goes a bit too far, you'll notice that the world has been created and destroyed. Created and
they do
destroyed.
that. They do that thing, which I guess for younger people, I guess Futurama kind of did, where you see out the window of like, the world gets destroyed and then gets rebuilt, and then gets destroyed, and
example.
They do kind of like that, where he goes
kind
into...
of a cheap enough special effect to make too, right? Because you film going up and you just reverse it. And...
The other cool thing is because the time machine stands in one place.
Yeah.
Like he just sits in it. It's like a old school 1800s, it's like a carriage or a sleigh, yeah. And he like pushes the lever, and like everything moves in time around him.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He does it very slowly first.
Yeah, he just tests it.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. And the time machine, like the actual device,
there
is
cool. Quite a period of time where there's actually just walls and rock around him because
like a cave forms around him or something. I think
obviously the rubble that's fallen on top of that. But that's very clever. Very visually nice to look at as well.
Yeah,
the setting back in the 19th century, early 19th century, kind of prior World War One, I would say, or around World War One.
Yeah, no, I think it's late 1800s or something. It's like a steampunkish kind of.
Yeah, maybe Boer War, even early, that type of area.
Yeah.
Because there are suggestions that there are troops and
it's like a Victorian era, I think, around then. Yeah. So that's cool. Yeah,
very visually nice to look at.
Yeah, it's a fun movie and classic. Yeah. So the next movie is The Last Man on Earth, 1964.
I have this, but I've never seen it. I picked it up for $5.
Yeah. So this is based on the 50s novel I Am Legend by Richard Matheson.
Yes, such a good book.
Which is a great book. And this Vincent Price black and white movie is the best adaptation of it.
I've never seen it.
It's not the best movie, but it's a really interesting movie of a man being like terrorized in his house once the world's been taken over by like vampires, but not like cheesy vampires, like more like zombie, like they're like people, but anyway. But
like in the book.
Yeah, but in the thing is, then they remade it. They remade the book again in the 70s, this time they called it The Omega Man, 1971, with Charlton Heston. And they made it like a cheesy action movie where Charlton Heston drives around in a sports car during the apocalypse and like machine guns vampires down. And this is the version Dad liked.
I'm kind of down.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool. It's a fun movie. It's a fun movie. And then they remade it again in 2007 as I Am Legend with Will Smith, where they kind of kept that Charlton Heston vibe, and he's like driving around in a car and like shooting out the window and stuff. And it was an okay movie. It was pretty shit. But
I think the I haven't seen The Last Man on Earth.
Yeah.
But I prefer the story from the book over I Am Legend.
So that's what I'm saying is the Last Man on Earth is the best adaptation of the book because it keeps that smaller like guy in his house like trying to survive and like going about his day. That's the best version. And then they made these other versions. And the one version, I Am Legend, the Will Smith movie, that kept the name of the book is the one that kind of misses the point of it completely.
Yeah.
Even the Omega Man kind of has more elements of the book.
The ending's completely different.
They screwed it up. They fucked it up.
Yeah. See, this is one I struggle to remember. I mean, it might have came on...
Oh, Last Man on Earth.
Yeah.
You probably would have seen it,
the cinema. It might have been on TV, but I don't remember.
I got it on Blu-ray.
Yeah.
I might have to
revisit
it's a good one,
something like that.
Next one, here's a big one. 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968.
This changed culture, didn't it?
This is an interesting one because, when we'll talk about it later, people think about, sci-fi. It's like it wasn't until Star Wars where the special effects got good and things got big, and it's like, but
it was 2001.
Kubrick did it 10 years before Star Wars.
When we went to the Astor to see the 70mm film print, I'm watching it and there's like scenes where there's people moving inside the ship, but the ship is fake. Yeah. And I said to James, I leaned over, I'm like, if you asked me to recreate that with my 2019 knowledge, I wouldn't have any idea.
I love the scene.
Very clever.
You've seen, I think probably all here's seen the back to the behind the scenes footage where they're filming an inside spaceship sequence where they're like walking,
the revolving.
Oh yeah, and the whole set they created, like the actual thing actually revolves, the thing moves, and they're sort of walking on the spot. But like the whole set's turning.
But the camera's in place, so it looks like the ship is moving and they're moving up. Yeah.
It's just crazy.
Yeah, it's kind of like what Nolan did in Inception, where the hallway kind of tilts, but it looks like people are running up and down. Yeah, it's cool.
Incredibly creative man.
Kubrick.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like the lengths. And Nolan. We'll talk about him later. But like the lengths Kubrick went to make something like realistic.
It's craziness.
And like scientifically accurate, and working with Arthur C. Clarke, who wrote the book, and they made the movie at the same time. So it's like the book and the movie. It's not an adaptation. It's a companion piece.
People probably would have thought he was crazy when he was doing this movie.
Oh yeah, but it's like it's one of those movies that's so like weird and psychedelic, and kind of like at first people didn't know how to react to it. Because this is also at the time...
They still don't really.
That's true.
You take someone who's never seen it and you make them watch it and
they'll be like, what the hell was that?
Yeah,
but this is also at a time where, one, the special effects were nothing like that. And two, most of the movies were like the ones we've been talking about, like fun space adventure movies. Or like, giant monster. Yeah. I should also mention I had to cut out all the giant monster movies, Radioactive, like, because I didn't have time to talk about them, but I love those movies. And we're not mentioning any of the superhero movies, which are all sci-fi movies, but it's like we ain't got time to talk about those.
Yeah, there's too much.
And that's almost like its own genre anyway. Yeah. So
I actually was probably responsible for narrowing this down a little bit, other than the 70, 80 that we had to cut out. Because
I had to cut them out before I even showed you the list.
We had to cut out. Also, there was a lot of Outer Limits.
Oh, yeah.
Things like that was introduced in Deadly Earnest, which was a guy that would introduce the weekly horror movie, sci-fi, genre every week, and he would come out of the coffin, so to speak. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's like an Elvira kind of like, here's the, cheesy
all the good TV
B-movie of the week. Yeah.
And, of course, The Twilight Zone also had a lot, which was in competition with
some of the best science fiction stories are Twilight Zone and Outer Limits. Just, single episodes of like... And again, it comes back to that. If you got a good idea, it doesn't matter if you got great special effects and lots of things flying around. It's all about that idea.
There are, I've got to say, I believe it's Outer Limits. I could be wrong. Where one of the gentlemen was left on the planet himself, and he actually says the word "stop," and when the missiles are coming in.
Oh yeah. He has the
and they're almost about to hit the ground, and he had the ability
is that the
to
one,
say stop.
I can't remember if it's the one with the stopwatch. There's one with a stopwatch.
There's one with a stopwatch as well.
Then I think there's one. I think that because they made the new Outer Limits and the new Twilight Zone like in the 80s. There's one where the lady has a necklace where she puts it on and time stops. There's a few different ones of that. Yeah, but it's like he can stop time, but then nuclear war happens and he can't restart it because then the world will get destroyed.
Yeah,
so he ends up having to live. That's the best.
That's depressing.
Yeah. Oh man, Twilight Zone has the best twist endings of and then the guy gets stuck and it's like, oh no.
And there's very rarely is there a good ending.
Yeah.
I mean, much depressing.
It's kind of like when you watch Twilight Zone and there's a happy ending, you're like, yes, because usually it's just like the guy getting punished for being
like
bad.
The original Black Mirror.
Yeah, I mean, Black Mirror is a more like hardcore version of Twilight Zone, kind of like more modern. All right, so 2001, and like I said, like special effects wise, nothing would become close to this until Star Wars in 1977, almost 10 years later. Yeah. So it's really impressive. And also, in 1968, the same year as 2001, you had Planet of the Apes, which is another absolute classic movie that I love. But people think of Planet of the Apes and they're like, oh yeah, the ape makeup and that. But there's the ape makeup in 2001 as well.
Yeah.
So it's like both those movies were kind of ahead of their time in special effects. What would you consider
to be better? The ape makeup in 2001 or in... Because I know they're slightly different because the apes are more human. It's different. The apes are more, say, modernized.
In 2001, they don't really have to talk or emote. So it's, I guess
they get angry.
Yeah, but actual close-ups to the camera.
Yeah.
Whereas in Planet of the Apes, it's like they're actual
characters.
Their characters you close up and they have.
So they're damn dirty apes. They're both Planet of the Apes.
Yeah. But they're both very impressive. And 2001 often the apes get overlooked because of Planet of the Apes coming out the same year.
You got to bear in mind, if I can interject here, is that I'm of older stock here in this room. And each movie that came out was being viewed by said me.
Yeah.
For the very first time.
That's the thing,
I had no back reference to go, but 2001 and 1998 was better because there was no comparison. Yeah. Everything was new and fresh for me.
Yeah.
Now, even the stuff from the 50s was being viewed by me the very first time.
Yeah.
Whether I saw it as a 1 hour short prior to the main movie at, in this case I was referring to today as the Brunswick Cinema.
Yeah.
There was no, the other version was better.
Yeah. And also, we were talking about before about how if you saw a movie, you might not get to see that movie again for years sometimes because you don't know if is it going to come back on TV.
Pre-VHS.
Is it going to come back into cinema? Like, once you saw it, it's like, oh, I remember that movie.
That's when TV was special.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like...
We were talking about that not long ago, how interesting it must have been to live in a time when, like, you had, like, 4 television stations, and everyone knew there was going to be a certain movie on at that time. Yeah. So you would go to school or work, and you would just talk, did you watch...
Yeah, but also if you missed it...
leading up to that, we got to go home and watch this. I mean, I was saying that, a big deal for me was to go race home and watch Batman, because it was the same bat time and the same bat channel, and it really, like, you had to get home by, say, 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and if you missed it, it's like you just didn't see that episode.
Yeah. It was serious
business.
A while.
You'd have to wait for another, what they call resyndication. Yeah. Sometimes happen next year. Yeah. Sometimes,
sometimes it didn't happen at all.
Star Trek. Original Star Trek, we would have got one bout in, I believe, 60. I'm guessing here. 68, and then the next bout was 71, and the next one was 73.
Yeah. So sometimes you just wouldn't see an episode, and like years later, I was saying to I'm a lot younger, like growing up in the 90s. I still remember, like, Dad used to tape Thunderbirds off the TV for me. And so, like, I would watch all the Thunderbirds episode, and it was, it's still one of my favorite shows. Yeah. But it wasn't until years later in the 2000s where I got the DVD box set, and I was like, there's so many episodes I didn't see. I was like, how I didn't even know these existed. So you can imagine, being in the 60s, which is like...
But if you missed it, you knew you missed it.
No, but I didn't, though, because
it's like back in the day.
In like in the mid-90s, it's like the internet was a thing, but it wasn't really a thing where you look up all the Thunderbirds episodes.
But I mean in the 60s, if you missed it, you knew definitely that you missed it. Yeah, and that would have had another sort of level of pain.
But also... In one way you didn't as well, because sometimes if you missed an episode and nobody told you about, did you see that episode?
Yeah, you didn't even know it existed,
You didn't know it existed until the next time it went around. Yeah. Now, I don't know whether, I'll pick on the syndicated channels there, would just go, these are the 20 we own, and these are the 20 that we're going to continuously put on. But in actual fact, there was 25 of them.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's
not every station might not get every episode.
Yeah. And especially, like, as we were saying, like, America, in America, it would come out in 65, but it might not come to Australia until, like, 72.
Yeah.
And then, if you missed it in 72, you might not see it again until 10, 20, 30 years later. You might not even know it existed. Yeah, and like, because, you might watch the ending of a movie, 1970 and be like, what movie was that? You might not see it again for 30 years, or you might not know what it is until the internet's invented 30 years later.
Yeah.
And then you get to search it up and look for it.
But it's something like we were mentioning before regarding the Sequest, which is Journey to the Bottom of the Sea.
Journey, and then there was a show called Sequest, but that was like the 80s.
That was an 80s, but using the original version, we since discovered just only today it was 65.
61.
61. Sorry, yes, up until about 65 was the main set, and then there was some more.
Yeah.
See, we wouldn't have got that. I'm picking on the 65 version that we were looking at. We probably would have got the first syndicated run at 68.
Yeah.
Then I remember probably 71.
Yeah.
You also got to remember as a lad, certain activities become more prevalent of, say, when I was 10, 11, my awareness changed once more.
Yeah.
So then if it ever came back on TV again, then you started watching that.
Yeah.
It was probably more important to me for Lost in Space, maybe, Star Trek.
Yeah. Original Star Trek is still, again, comes back to that the idea is more important than the look of the show.
Even though...
And I think the show looks fucking awesome.
Yeah, Star Trek to me was also the serious part of my sci-fi.
Yeah,
that was like the adult kind of sci-fi.
And the Lost in Space was the enjoyable...
That was like the fun adventure, yeah.
You know, plus it had a cool robot.
And had the cool robot.
And an actually cool spaceship. The jetpack was very important. The lunar module
that
came
rover
out,
thing they had there,
And every now and then when they did a more expensive sequence of showing the aircraft not just crashing like it did all the time, actually putting its landing gear down, it's like, wow.
Yeah.
You know, and they came out of the staircase on the leg.
Yeah.
You know,
that was cool.
And
what more do you want?
Ray guns. You know, it ticked off my boxes of machinery, robots,
adventure,
adventure guns. You know, it ticked every single box.
I think like there's this great, you know, I love intellectual sci-fi and small ideas, but then there is that fun adventure sci-fi that you need that itch scratch as well, where it's just like flying saucers going, landing on a strange planet and being like firing ray guns at alien, monsters and stuff. That shit's cool.
We'll move on in a second, but there was a point where then it got to Mr. Carrot Head, and there were beach balls that were put in the sand that were supposed to be bombs if you touched them. Even I went at a young lad went, come on, now you're pushing it a little bit.
The alien's a little dog.
In Star Trek.
In Star Trek.
Well, didn't in Lost in Space she had a chimp, right?
Yeah.
Judy had. Was it Judy or she had a chimp
with the long ears. Which
they stuck some ears on the chimp.
Couldn't do that.
But she had it for a while, so you grew kind of fond of this chimp type thing, But what they did in the movie was another thing.
We'll talk. I mean, we don't have to. Probably won't get to the movie, but that was where they tried really hard to make this cool 90s edgy version of it. It's actually a fun movie. It's not
I remember
it's not great, but anyway. So Planet of the Apes still packs a punch, and the ending still has an impact. It's written by Rod Serling, who, Twilight Zone. Yeah. That's still a great movie. Also 1968, Night of the Living Dead.
Oh boy.
Which you'd put more in the horror category, and I was going to cut it out, but I feel like it's just such an important movie, and it does fit in the sci-fi genre.
If I'm correct, don't they say they don't know if it's aliens or not or something?
Well, yeah,
there's like a whole thing.
There's like a comet that streaks across the sky, and that then sparks the zombie outbreak. So no one knows exactly.
No, but I actually watched that movie for the first time. Last year.
Yeah.
And honestly, it holds up really well.
People also, with a lot of these movies, we've been talking about, people don't understand that before this movie, zombies weren't really a thing.
There's no reference point.
Yeah. And the zombies that did exist was like a ghoul who got out of his coffin and then was, had a master who told him to go kill someone or something like that. Or there was the idea of voodoo zombies of you get resurrected. But George Romero really kind of invented the modern zombie of the flesh-eating, brain-eating, wandering. Before Night of the Living Dead, that wasn't really a thing, and especially the idea of people trapped in a house getting, getting attacked from all sides. That he kind of started that kind of thing.
It's such a sick film too.
Yeah, and it's actually even though it's a super low-budget movie, it's actually really well done, and it still feels very modern.
Oh, yeah.
Just probably because of the budget, the way they shoot it, it's handheld and very quick and it feels remarkably modern. And then, of course, you got Dawn of the Dead, 1978.
Classic.
Which, just one of the greatest zombie movies of all time. Just absolute classic. And then you've got Day of the Dead, 1985, which another really, really great movie. So all these three movies is really interesting, all the best zombie movies, pretty much, still to this day. All right, going into the 70s, we got the Andromeda Strain, 1971, which is a really cool disease, outbreak thriller, which I love a good outbreak thriller. And then you've got THX 1138, also 1971.
Which I've never seen.
Which is a really interesting movie. It's George Lucas's first feature film, based on his short student film. And then he got to make it in a big, feature-length version. It's a really interesting movie. Very, very 70s, very dystopian, it's actually, you know, George Lucas, before he became what he became, like he was like a serious filmmaker. Like there was this American Graffiti and then Star Wars, and then it was just all downhill after that. Like he was actually a really interesting filmmaker, and this pointed to something, you know, extraordinary that unfortunately Star Wars kind of ruined him in a way, I think. Then you've got Silent Running, 1972, which is one of Dad's favorites. He introduced that one to me as well. That's a really another movie with an important message that's just as important now than, you know, an environmental message.
Considering the environment speak.
Bruce Dern is like a space hippie trying to save the trees.
Yeah, and it's probably one of the first times. I mean, I am now excluding Outer Limits and Twilight Zone serials and what have you. It was the first time that showed like a forest garden in space.
Yeah, the kind of biodome in space.
Thing, which is
the special effects in this movie are pretty good. They hold up.
They do hold up pretty well, and it's actually, considering it's a very slow movie.
Yeah,
it's also the message builds up.
Yeah, it's one of those great sci-fi movies that's about the idea and about the dilemma, and it's not about, you know, the adventure or the ray guns. It's about like a guy trying to conserve this last piece of the Earth's environment floating through space. Yeah. There's no real, like, you know, there's no shootouts or anything. There's no big, you know, galactic battle or...
You know, technically it's kind of almost bordering back to 2001
not even that.
I'm not talking about the apes and in the beginning and what have you. The overall spacecraft.
The slow moving
spacecraft is what I meant.
Also, it had the little robots, Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
Yeah, which were basically the first gonk droids.
Yeah, they were like little boxy gonk droids. Yeah, they were cool.
Their Star Wars showed them just being big battery packs that just moved along with their legs.
Yeah,
going gonk, gonk, gonk.
Yeah.
But the thing is, these were
like little helper droids. Droids, like gardener droids.
They were somewhat a little bit sideways, so they had what looked like eyes, and a mouth, that type of thing. But I'm not sure. I can't remember if they made any noise.
Maybe beeps. I can't remember. Yeah,
but. You know, and of course the machinery that he had, the sort of I suppose you could sort of say the dune buggy to get around this vast ship.
Yeah, that was cool.
Visually, very nice to look at.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
It is a good movie. Yeah.
You've got Slaughterhouse 5, 1972. Pretty good adaptation of Kurt Vonnegut. Kurt Vonnegut's, you know, has a lot of sci-fi novels, but they're always very hard to adapt. Just his ideas and the way he writes, it's like hard to adapt. It's pretty solid movie, bit cheesy now, but still stands up. Solaris, 1972.
I love this adaptation.
So the thing is, like, Tarkovsky is one of probably the most famous Russian, you know, at least Soviet era filmmaker, artsy as fuck. You know, hipsters love him. And as much as I love movies and as much as I love arty movies and...
You just can't get behind him.
I've watched 3 Tarkovsky movies so far. Ivan's Childhood, Solaris. That's my last straw. So I've seen Solaris. I saw first because I had heard about this movie. This kind of like, it was like the Soviet 2001, you know. And I'd heard about this movie so many years, and I actually went to the Astor and I saw a film print of it, and it looks really cool, but it's a drag for me.
I know you don't like Stalker. But I still would
we'll get there. We'll get there. Because I don't like Stalker is not the way to put it, how I feel towards it.
The thing about Solaris is I understand that the gentleman who wrote the book, I can't remember his name.
Stanislaw Lem?
Yes.
Is that his name?
He didn't like Tarkovsky's adaptation because he said it
also, when it comes to adaptations, it's not really an adaptation.
Yeah.
It's like Tarkovsky doing whatever the fuck he wants.
Yeah, he ignored large portions of the
happens
novel.
with Stalker as well.
Yeah, that's right. But I kind of really liked his adaptation. You said it's a drag, but it was very optimistic to me in the sense that
it ends on a like really sour note.
Well, he spends a lot of time with his love, kinda.
I mean, isn't she like not there?
in a way.
Spoiler?
Yeah, in a way, question mark.
Yeah.
But then he kind of goes down to the planet and it's
and then he gets stuck there with his dad or whatever.
Yeah, but he wants to be there.
Nah, fuck that movie, man. Anyway,
I liked it.
I feel like it's important to mention just because it's a Soviet sci-fi movie and that's not really
Yeah,
I think.
I'm not familiar with it. I've got to actually.
Yeah, I don't think you like it. It's also because if I'm not, I might be mistaken. I think Tarkovsky didn't like 2001 and was like, I'm going to make my 2001 by making Solaris.
No, he didn't. He didn't like it.
It's also, it's one of those cases of like, kind of like with Things to Come, how H.G. Wells didn't like Metropolis. It's like, you made an inferior movie.
Oh, I agree.
Like,
I agree.
Come on, it's not as good it's nowhere near as good as 2001.
Case of directors thinking they're probably better than they are.
Yeah, it's like, I didn't like that movie, so I'm going to show them. And anyway, Soylent Green, 1973, another good one. Dad likes this one. Classic.
One.
Yeah, everyone knows this one. Just for the name, I guess. No one's probably seen the movie. But it's a pretty good movie. It has that cool dystopian, overpopulation and all that stuff. The 70s were really good for both like fun adventure and like really dark, serious, like the world dystopian is coming to an end and all this shit.
Yeah.
Like really good balance.
I got to say, if I can go back to Soylent Green, seeing a movie for the first time, the biggest thing in Planet of the Apes was that we were still here and the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah.
That was a jaw dropper there was no back reference that was going to happen. It was a kind of Luke, I'm your father moment back then. But in Soylent Green, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen Soylent Green.
Skip ahead 5 seconds.
When you find out the little green chips were
Soylent Green is
using
people.
up old people, it was another
that's both Charlton Heston and Planet of the Apes and Soylent Green. He's always on top of the twist.
Those twists sort of are equal with.
The twist became more iconic than the movie.
Yeah,
and the Soylent kind of became a joke on like Futurama or whatever.
They used it on The Simpsons a lot.
Yeah, exactly. So, but the movie's actually not bad. Like it's sometimes the things from the movie overshadow it.
Yeah. The spoiler, the twist at the end probably was the movie.
Yeah, that kind of overshadowed the rest of the movie.
It did drag a little bit, but it was okay.
Yeah. Westworld 1973, another absolute
one. What a banger.
Absolute classic. It's like the proto Terminator, like before Terminator was a thing. Like you had Westworld where the robot, take over the theme park and killing people. It's fucking awesome. Yul Brynner is the coolest dude.
Yeah.
It's just a really fun movie, kind of like a disaster movie based on, I think Michael Crichton wrote it and he wrote Jurassic Park. So this is also like the proto Jurassic Park where the theme park,
theme parks,
it's like the theme park attractions come alive and attack you. It's like
now
that was
the theme park attractions eat you.
Yeah, it's like that. That was his.
Like the idea of a theme park because it allows you to insert your own theme.
Yeah,
and just run with it.
And also, you're trapped in this place like it's like a zoo, but it's also quite expansive because it's on a stretch of land. It's not just a building or whatever. Yeah, it's really cool. And also, you got robots, which Dad likes. But also, these robots are like androids, like humanoid, which is cool. There's like bits where they like take the robot's face off, and there's all mechanical bits.
And that's iconic too.
I mean, it does help that I was always, I still am a Yul Brynner fan.
Oh yeah,
I've
he's
just
so
liked
cool
him in virtually everything. That sort of
Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, I mean, because he's a very mixed European, Mongolian, stroke Russian.
Right, yeah, he's from Russia. Yeah.
So going off a little bit sci-fi here. Probably my absolute favourite of his movies is Taras Bulba. They're really sort of Ukraine. Cossack thing, which is really, really good.
Yeah, it's cool.
Worth a watch if anybody is, into that sort of era. But
historical epic.
You got to also remember that since the invention, if you will, of the theme parks, leading into the most famous of them all, Disneyland, followed by Disney World, everybody always had the theme park thing. When that came out, the theme park was something that will it evolve to that, in people's hopes,
that's a good point. Is like when Walt Disney created Disneyland, he had like the Epcot Center, and it's like, what will the world be? Like Tomorrowland, it's like, what will the world be in the future? And people, eventually people are like, well, if you go to a theme park, you can live out your fantasy here. It's like it becomes you visit another world kind of thing.
And the World Fair was also big from the 50s, 60s, particularly in the 60s. When they did a World Fair, it was
Yeah,
a world
to show
fair.
off new technology.
Monorails, you're talking showing new technologies. I know Iron Man touches a bit on this.
Yeah.
But for people who might think that was actually fake, they actually went all out to do future car, future plane, future furniture, future everything. So
they made kitchen appliances from the future, and big, bulbous kind of 60s looking things, but it's like that's what they thought the future would be like.
If I have a minor regret in not, I suppose, having 9 lives, is that not going to any of these world fairs was something I would have loved to.
Yeah.
But I mean,
but in saying that, I also haven't been Disneyland either. So
yeah, exactly. It's not like in 1965 you could be like, as a kid, like, I'm going to America, and
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, you're talking from a family that didn't have much money, so you can only dream. That's all you could do.
Yeah. Logan's Run, 1976.
That's a good one.
This is a fun, cheesy ass movie.
Is that the one where if they turn a certain age?
Yeah, once you turn 30, you get like euthanized.
It's I watched that and I really enjoyed it.
It's really fun, and it looks really cheesy, and you got
have the thing or whatever.
Yeah, they got like a ruby in their palm, and there's like a big boxy robot that's like malfunctions all the time. It's really fun.
Yeah, very colourful, if I remember.
And all the actors in the movie were over 30.
Yeah, that's what I was like.
Then you had 1977 Capricorn One. This is one of Dad's favourites. One, because as planes and aviation stuff, but also it's like a really cool chase thriller.
Yeah.
Like a bunch of astronauts who are going to be the first men on Mars. At the last minute, they get taken out of the rocket and told that the Mars landing is going to be faked, and that they're just got to be hushed up, and they decide to escape and expose that to the world.
But they actually do launch a proper rocket, and the tradition of it going to Mars.
Yeah, but I think they realized that they couldn't land and then take off again, so they're just we're just going to fake it.
But that rocket actually blew up.
Oh, that's right. So it blew up, and then everyone thinks they're dead. So they're like, oh crap, we have to escape before these guys probably try to kill us to keep it a secret.
They were going to kill them, because to hide the initial secret.
And then it's like a chase movie where these guys run across the desert, and there's planes and cars and shit. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's got.
I recommend
some really good helicopter scenes.
Also, also if me and you have talked about this before, Dad, but I'm pretty sure before this, the whole moon landing was fake, wasn't really a thing.
No.
And then Capricorn 1 came out, and it became a thing.
Really,
people were the seed in a lot of
people were like, oh, it's true. They did this for the moon landing.
And it was Kubrick. Yeah, I was going to say, everybody knows Kubrick did it.
Yeah. And it's he was working with NASA, didn't you see? That's why they gave him the lenses for Barry Lyndon. It's a conspiracy. He was trying to tell us the truth in The Shining. That's why Danny's wearing a rocket ship. And it's like, no, shut up. It wasn't a thing. Capricorn 1 was a fictional movie that people got a bit too excited about.
And even though I've been a true believer of the moon landing, and also 1 or 2 or 3 years after 1969's actual moon landing, they brought all the Apollo stuff out here.
Yeah.
They gutted the ground floor of Maya and put the capsules, the lunar modules, the spacesuits, everything. They even brought out real
Did you get to
American
see it?
Indians. Yeah, and they were dancing on stage, which was the most colourful, nicest thing I've ever seen.
I didn't know that.
Even I saw all the equipment. You were allowed to touch the
Wow. No way.
Couldn't get away with that today.
Yeah, there's no way they let you touch that stuff today.
But even after seeing Capricorn 1, even I had some doubt. Now, I still believe that the moon landing
it happened. How many? There was 5 different ones.
It just became, way too expensive. Then if they found something, I think it would have gone further. Yeah. They didn't find nothing.
I think that's kind of the sad thing is people kind of lost interest in the real, the space travel and stuff. And it's only in the last couple of years with SpaceX where it's people have started maybe getting a little bit more interested.
And there
but
might
it's kind
be something
of sad
on Mars now. And,
but it's kind of sad that people have kind of lost that sense of adventure and what's out there kind of thing. And that's why I love Interstellar because it's more about that. It's we can't stay here. We got shit to do in outer space, But yeah, I guess we should, I mean, it's kind of obvious, but, 2001 came out in 1968, and that was a year before the moon landing. So you can imagine before the moon landing seeing 2001 and being like, holy shit, blows my mind. Because it's like they were doing a realistic interpretation of space travel before the moon landing had even happened.
Yeah.
So that's hyped up the moon landing even further too.
I guess
like
so.
leading up to it.
It did.
Like would have caused a much bigger interest in space in general.
Yeah.
The kind of those sci-fi epics.
Yeah, well, around that time, it's like everyone had that kind of moon landing fever or whatever, like, interest in space travel.
Mum says she got let out of school early to go home and watch the moon landing.
Yeah.
And all that kind of stuff. It was big business.
Me too. I watched it. But what I can remember of it is now only as recall of what you see on TV, but you do have these nostalgic moments that, yes, we did watch that for real. There was no
so like the whole world stopped to watch
it. Mum, press record. No, there was none of that.
It's got to burn it into your retinas as quickly as you can.
No, it's like really like the whole world stops. Like it happened.
Yeah. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977. Now we're
entering the era of the mega blockbuster.
So we're getting close to Star Wars, everyone. Hold on to your butts. So Close Encounters of the Third Kind, 1977.
Absolute banger. Another major classic.
Yeah, this is also an interesting one because it's more about the characters and the Earth stuff, and it's more about UFO visiting Earth and all that stuff.
Is
which
this
is
one
really
of the
cool.
first sort of movies that really, I guess, goes a bit further into like abductions and like on a more human scale, like sort of close encounters
in blockbuster sense?
Probably,
yes. Big movie sense, yes. I mean,
it's
Twilight
also
Zone, Outer Limits, those type of things did cover that subject.
Yeah, it's the first one that felt. I'm going to use the word realistic in the sense that it was mainly about the third kind being like
mainstream as well.
No, the third kind being like just the one before Contact. What is it?
So
like sightings or whatever. Or
first
communication or I can't remember.
I'm pretty sure first is sightings.
Yeah.
Second is I want to say messages or something like that, and then third is a physical encounter.
Yeah, so I like that.
I'm pretty sure.
This movie, this movie was like it's not just about being abducted, getting probed, and then or being abducted and going on an adventure on another planet. It's more about that's like the stages of the encounters, and like the man on, and then it ends with the third kind encounter, and then that's where it ends. And it's like whatever happens after, that's a different story that we don't see. That's what I like about it. And also, it came out, I think, just after Star Wars, and it kind of proved that Star Wars wasn't a fluke when it came to sci-fi.
Yeah.
It's like, if you have a good director, a good idea, good special effects, like, sci-fi can be a huge thing. Because really, before Star Wars, all these movies we mentioned, even though they're classics and, beloved, it's like, none of them were, like, huge, like, mega blockbuster. None of them were, like, taken super seriously. Sci-fi was still kind of like a kid's thing.
Yeah.
So Close Encounters kind of proved it's like you can do like a serious drama about sci-fi that's not Star Wars and also be really successful. Should we move on to Star Wars?
Star Wars is pretty good.
Star Wars 1977. Not much to say about it. Yeah. Pretty good.
Well, I think we've said everything before. Moving on.
But I mean, what we should. I'm sure we've talked about it, in this episode, but probably on other episodes. Like before Star Wars, sci-fi was stuff like Logan's Run, cheesy, kind of dodgy looking effects. Like it wasn't.
So I mean, we've talked to death about Star Wars.
Yeah.
I want to know what Andre has to say about Star Wars.
Yeah.
Well, of course, for us, I think it came out here in 78.
Yeah, probably would have come out 78.
What have you? You got to. I mean, look. I'm a big fan of Star Wars.
How old were you when the original Star Wars came out? If you don't mind me asking.
77.
17. Because I'm born in '60. Says 17.
Yeah.
17.
17 in 77, 18 in 78, which was probably by the time it came to Australia, you would have been around 18.
Yeah, I was 18. So for me, I would say that had an impact because you got to remember, up until this time, the only familiar kind of adventure, swashbuckling hero movie was Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
And Flash Gordon was old as the hills.
Flash Gordon were like 1930s adventure serials that would play on TV in the 60s, which is when you saw them.
Yeah. So even then they were old.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Come on, can somebody do something a bit newer?
Yeah. That's the thing, is that George Lucas wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie, but he couldn't get the rights, so he just made Star Wars. So people like George Lucas and Spielberg, like you, Dad, grew up with the old Flash Gordon black and white serials.
And I'm glad he didn't get the rights to Flash Gordon, because Flash Gordon as a remake would have been, we've already seen that.
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas this has actually got hints of it, but it's not a copy of.
He made his own thing out of that. But it's like, people of that generation who grew up with that, it's like, but that was like old sci-fi. And it's like George Lucas and Spielberg and people of their generation, they interpreted that and used that to then make new sci-fi, which is then now we start getting to like the late 70s and 80s stuff, where it's like, oh shit, this is when it, like, this sci-fi becomes like big
this
blockbuster.
This is when it kicks off.
Like special effects up the arse, like crazy, over the top. Like,
to answer your question a little bit, probably the most overwhelming for me was the opening scene of the blockade runner.
Yeah.
Then there's this big ass whale ship chasing it. It's like, whoa, what is this?
Yeah.
But for me, I suppose the most imprinted in my mind was when the two droids jumped into the escape pod. The escape pod got that noise and pushed it out, and then it's spinning and watching the ship in the distance.
Yeah.
I thought that was just something else.
We've said a few times on this episode before, there's no reference point.
No.
Yeah.
And there is no reference point.
But that's the thing,
like that.
is like we said, other than 2001, which is way ahead of its time, like Star Wars has changed the game. Like the special effects became like realistic. The look of things became kind of dirty and lived in and like mechanical and tangible.
Well, when we watched Star Wars in 4K on the projector, as it was meant to be seen in like that big blown up picture, towards the end of the film, when Luke is trying to blow up the Death Star, and you've got Darth Vader behind him in his TIE fighter.
Advanced TIE fighter.
And he has you have that big black imposing figure, and it's red behind him. I said, imagine seeing that for the first time in 1977.
Yeah.
And it would have been what, 70mm film as well, or 30?
No, it would have been 35.
Yeah, 35
some places would have shown it 70, but
I
can't imagine
it in bigger. But
I can't imagine seeing that out of nowhere. Imagine if you'd never seen a sci-fi movie before.
Yeah, but
which
also
some people wouldn't have.
Yeah,
and then you see that.
Also keep in mind, like most of the sci-fi movies we were talking about before Star Wars is like the spaceships were like UFOs, flying saucers. They look like saucers. They were kind of, or you had like, stuff like Forbidden Planet, where it's like very blocky and lots of blinking lights.
But that was also flying saucer.
Yeah, but I'm talking about the technology inside, like the blinking lights and the beeping, booping, and like.
Yeah. And then you had either the big ships, like in Silent Running, or in 2001. Which were just very large.
Or you had Logan's Run, which is very cheesy, but people wore robes, and things are very sleek, and it's like it wasn't until Star Wars where it's like, holy shit, like this is a world that exists.
I mean, you got to remember, for me, it also ticked my boxes of machinery.
Oh yeah, you got droids
because I'm an aviation fan, big time.
Yeah,
but I also got droids and robots. And laser guns that actually sounded really good.
That's got like 20 different versions of R2 on the shelf.
I've got 20 versions, and I've got some. Now over a period of time, I've collected other R units.
Different R4
as well. Different, R4, R5, etc., etc. Also, I've got a fairly good collection of robots.
Yeah, you got all the old tin robots.
Yeah,
you got a Robbie the robot.
I've got a version of Robbie Robot. Yeah. The original just cost way too much.
Oh yeah, no, that's ridiculous.
Dollars, and I don't want to go down that path.
Yeah, but yeah, Star Wars like changed the game.
Yeah,
and like a lot of people, especially young people, don't really understand how special it was and how much it influenced every single movie that came after.
Well, yeah, pretty much
after this point,
most of the movies after we're going to talk about after take something.
It's just like it has something to do with like it has some influence of Star Wars. Even the ones you don't think do.
Yeah. See, you tick more boxes than you think. I mean, See, up until I'll just pick on to my birth of 60 up until 77.
Yeah.
The studios were pumping out romances, rom-coms, westerns were still quite high in my earlier life. War movies, combat, etc. Every genre, pirate movies, every genre except the studios really weren't investing in space. Yeah. They would throw a bit of money sci-fi, every now and then.
I think sci-fi, even the
likes of genius things like Capricorn One and
even the big ones that we've been talking about. Most of them were seen as B movies.
Yeah.
Whether they were or not didn't really matter. It's like sci-fi was strictly like a B movie thing.
Yeah.
Until Star Wars came out and it was like, hang on a second.
That's why probably a lot of years went past as well. Sitcoms were also very high up in my day.
Yeah.
You'd go home, race home in the afternoon to watch your Batmans, your I Dream of Genies, your,
I guess we should also, like Star Trek, the original series came out in 66, and that was a big, important step.
But actually that was shown in a more adult time.
Yeah, but that was also seen because as Gene Roddenberry wanted it, he's like Wagon Train in space.
Yeah.
Like that was like a series. It's like a series, like a Western kind of thing. But Star Wars was like completely blew everyone away. Yeah. It's like this is a space adventure, like big budget, great special effects. Like this is a different breed almost.
Yeah,
like it changed the game.
To
entirely.
Me, I know I'm jumping just a little bit forward, but it'll catch in that motion where the first and second movie, the second movie topped the first movie, and then made it like
Star Trek or Star Wars.
I know this is a bad example, but it's like Casino Royale, and then you got the Quantum of Solace. When you look at the movies on the second movie on its own, it's kind of not a big deal.
Yeah.
But if you actually
connect
it and watch it just straight after, like maybe just take a toilet break, but it gels.
Yeah.
Now I know Empire Strikes Back gels a lot more than.
Oh no! Are you talking about specifically Star Wars?
Star
Wars and Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi can be watched completely separate of each other and are still objectively great movies.
When you watch them together,
but
it's still
because they're such a great trilogy, you watch them all back to back, which is what I always do, and it's like
and they link up so beautifully.
Yeah, it's like when you say, "Oh, what's your favorite movie?" You say the Star Wars trilogy, and you just count them as one.
It's like Lord of the Rings, kinda.
Yeah, but Lord of the Rings was like filmed all back to back. Yeah, it's like it was filmed back to back, and it was made to be viewed. It's one continuing story.
Yeah.
Whereas Star Wars, it's like came out 1977. Then you had 3 years later Empire Strikes Back. Then 3 years later you had Return of the Jedi. And even though they're connected, it's still like separate adventures, and you can be watched separately. But yeah, you count them as one because they're all great. But yeah, that's not a case of like one takes away from another. It's like they're all great. Doesn't matter. You can watch them out of order and still fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Not that I'm saying you should do that. Alien, 1979.
I would argue Alien also took a bit from Star Wars.
Oh, 100%.
In the way the ships presented in the
Star Wars, if Star Wars didn't exist, Alien would be a way different movie.
Yeah.
Like
obviously it goes in a
and maybe
different
Alien
direction.
Would be still maybe even a bigger smash hit than if Star Wars didn't exist.
But that's the thing.
That's an if.
But that's only if Ridley Scott kept that and the special effects.
Yeah,
before, imagine if Star Wars didn't exist, no one probably wouldn't have even thought about the special effects being that good or the world looking that way.
Because the ships in Alien it borrow a lot from
it's that lived-in mechanical kind of
mechanical, semi-realistic spaceship depiction.
Yeah,
and the H.R. Geiger nastiness.
Yeah, but that's what's so great about Alien is that not only do you have the great Ron Cobb production design of the spacesuits and the spaceships and the kind of technology, then you have H.R. Giger's weird biological
pseudo-sexual
alien and the alien ship and the alien xenomorph creature, and so you got these two amazing designs
clashing
but also kind of
complementing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. See, James knows me well enough that this list lacks a lot of monster movies and all that because of time.
Oh, that's just for time because I love monster movies.
I've never
up to me,
I'll just fan of monster films, but the Alien was like, wow, what the hell is this?
Alien's like more like horror, horror sci-fi, but because of that, like Star Wars, like lived in mechanical nature, like that's I mean, that puts it on like top sci-fi level. Like, it's one of the great sci-fi movies.
I know it's going to sound weird, but some of my favorite parts of all these movies, like Event Horizon and Alien, my favorite part of all those movies is the first half an hour before everything goes wrong.
Yeah, it's just
you get to sit in that.
I do like that.
It's the great thing. Well, it's the great thing about science fiction is that sense of slow discovery.
Yeah, you get to you get to sit in that world and just look into that science fiction world for a little bit as they talk about their jargon or the computers.
Yeah, you introduce the world. And it's like you slowly put on the spacesuit and it's like go venture out and see what's out there, and then that's what's great about Alien. And also like the fact that it wasn't like a huge budget movie, but every penny, Ridley Scott puts every penny on screen. Like, it's one of the best looking sci-fi movies even to this day. It stands up so well, and every penny is on screen.
Puppets.
Yeah, man, it's all about puppets, animatronics,
animatronics, puppets.
Yeah. Like,
if it was CG, it would
look shit. Yeah. Like, and also we should mention that like from here until like 2000, all these movies using practical effects look better than everything that's come out in the last 20 years.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, once CGI started to take over, everything just started to look shit, and sci-fi became kind of boring and not
grey
special.
And brown, lots of.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't really recovered.
Yeah. Other than a few exceptions, it's just like. Yeah, really disappointing. What's next? The Black Hole, 1979. Dad really wanted to mention this one because it's a really fun... It's like a Disney sci-fi,
I've seen them on Disney Plus recently.
Yeah, it's just on Disney Plus, which is good because it was like released on Blu-ray once in America. It's like extremely expensive. So it's good that it's on Disney Plus and we can rewatch it.
Yeah, it took me a long time to find just a DVD for it.
Yeah, it's not a super popular one. Like, we probably wouldn't even added it to this list if Dad hadn't like been a big fan of it and like shown it to me and that.
It has its moments in it.
It's a really interesting movie. It has some cool shit. Like, it's obviously, it's 79, so they're taking a lot from Star Wars. Again, if Star Wars didn't happen, this movie probably wouldn't have even existed. But it's actually a really interesting movie.
It had a lot of technical advancements as well on its own. The big. I know that's the most famous scene of, the meteor or ball getting running down the middle of the ship and what have you. Yeah. Visually, that was, advanced technology of the time, cinema technology at the time.
Special effects.
It got a little bit camp with the Texan speaking robot, but that kind of threw it
because
off a bit.
Because it's a Disney movie, they tried to like put these like funny robots in like as like comedic relief.
They keep trying to do that, don't they?
Yeah, and
they do that too much.
It actually takes away from the rest of the movie, which is pretty like cool, serious like sci-fi movie about a guy who like goes crazy and he's like, they're like sent after him and stuff. It's like pretty cool.
And his psychic robot Maximilian, nasty piece of work.
Oh yeah, it's got like a big black. It's like a big black Terminator robot, right?
It's like Bakelite plastic.
Yeah, but isn't it like a black shell?
It's actually a burgundy, very dark burgundy.
Yeah.
Then there's got the black droids there, which actually you find out. Spoiler alert, I suppose.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
No, but that's okay.
No, I won't
don't
say
spoil
it because
it's not popular enough that everyone knows.
I won't mention that, but there are other droids in this.
Yeah, it's a cool movie. It's worth watching.
It's worth watching.
If you can get past the Texan robot, you'll realize that there's more.
Yeah, there's some cheesy, some cheesy like kiddie moments, and there's some like it's not as good as like Star Wars or Alien in terms of like the realistic designs. Like, it's a bit. But it's actually really interesting.
Visually, it's very nice to look at as well.
I might give it a watch.
It's a fun movie. It's a fun movie. Mad Max 1979. Got to mention it. Aussie classic. Moonraker 1979. Reason I mention this, Dad's big James Bond fan, introduced it to me when I was young, and I'm a huge James Bond fan. But also, you got to mention it because it's clearly they were just trying to cash in on the success of Star Wars, and we're just like, we got to send James Bond to space.
It would pretty much got really,
especially like the end of that movie where they're just in space, like firing laser guns at each other. Like, it's just so cash grabby and but
really
it's a lot of
out
fun.
Of this world, pardon the pun.
It's really fun. Stalker 1979, another Tarkovsky joint.
I love it.
So
I can't help it.
Similar to Solaris, I'd heard about this movie for years. I was always like, I got to see it, but I got to see it properly. It was never released on Blu-ray until recently. it was released on DVD, but they were like split over 2 discs because it's like a 3-hour or longer movie. And, you know, and I was just like, I gotta watch it properly. I gotta watch it, you know, on, you know, big screen like Solaris, you know, 35mm print. Callum got on Blu-ray. He's like, do you want to watch it? I'm like, yes, but it's playing at the Astor. I'm going to see it properly. I'm going to, you know, this is a special movie. Soviet, post-apocalyptic, you know, weird.
Based on a sci-fi classic novel as well.
Yeah. And so I went to see it, and I was like, most of it, I was just like, this is great. Like, I love the way it looks. It's so weird and slow and kind of disjointed, but in a good way.
Yeah, it's like a fever dream.
Yeah, and then as it started to get to the end, and I was just like, it started to have this really weird anti-science message, and it kind of lost me. And look, it had that kind of Return of the King thing where it was like 20 endings, and I was just like, you know what? I think I'm done with Tarkovsky.
Yeah, look.
And then I borrowed Ivan's Childhood from Callum, and I was like, hey, actually, I enjoyed that one. But Andrei Rublev is the last movie I'm willing... Yeah. So if I don't like Andrei Rublev, I'm done with Tarkovsky for good. Like, I love artsy movies, I love all that weird shit, but I'm done with him.
Look, I'm going to defend my boy.
Yeah.
Because, like, I love the film... And I can understand...
it's definitely worth watching. Everyone should see it once, especially if you're like a sci-fi fan.
I can understand why you would feel the way you do about the ending, but I would also say I'm assuming that there were certain restrictions put on him.
No.
You don't think that would be the case?
It was him. It was him. It was his personal view. And that's again, with Solaris ties into this, like, because it's based on the novel, he's just kind of threw it all out the window. Right. Now, one of the reasons he did that is because they shot it near...
they did have to reshoot some things, didn't they?
Yeah, because there was like a...
it was like
an abandoned power plant or something.
Yeah, and there was water running through, and it was like the water was contaminated.
Radioactive.
People got cancer during the production.
I'm pretty sure Tarkovsky died.
He literally died because of filming Stalker. Later on.
So it's like the movie's about going to like a forbidden zone, and it's like they literally went to a forbidden zone to film it, and everyone got radiation poisoning, cancer, and died later in their lives.
The book, though, is such an interesting idea. Like, it spawned some of my favorite video games and video game concepts.
So,
of like something comes from space, and they don't really quite know what it is.
No, so the idea is, it's based on a novel called Roadside Picnic, and essentially aliens come to Earth, and instead of like making first contact or whatever, they do whatever they're doing, and then they just go. So, like, the analogy is, if you go to a picnic and you leave a wrapper of a chocolate bar behind, we're the ants that find that chocolate bar, and we're like, wow, what a discovery. And that's essentially humankind reacting to aliens' presence.
So, the novel, that's what it's about. Yeah. And originally, when Tarkovsky was filming it, that's kind of what he was doing. He was basing it on the novel. But the radiation... affected the film stock, and they lost most of the film. They had to reshoot it. By that point, Tarkovsky was like, screw this, I'm just going to do whatever I want. Yeah. And that's when he started going on wild, weird tangents, which some of I like and some of I don't. And so kind of similar with Solaris, it's like he's just doing his own thing because he thinks he's a smarty pants. And some of it's fucking amazing. Yeah. But like I said, towards the end, I was like, fuck this movie.
I do agree.
But... like, it's an important movie, and I recommend watching it, but I didn't personally like it. But it's definitely worth watching, and especially because, again, like I said, Soviet, like, that's a very interesting... Yeah. You know, that's not really usually something you think of when you think of sci-fi.
And when you're watching it, be mindful that these actors are literally giving themselves cancer when they're...
Yeah.
Like, there are scenes where they're going through, like, a factory, and they're, like, sort of, like... waist deep in water. I'm like, that water's contaminated. That's going to kill them.
Yeah. There's a scene where the protagonist is laying down. Yeah. I cringe when I watch it. I'm like, oh, no.
Knowing the history of the movie when you're watching it, it adds a different light when they really shouldn't be doing any of these things.
I might not get a chance to watch it, but did they find something left over from Aliens there?
Well,
I mean,
it's a very...
Is that literal?
It's a very, what's the word?
Open for interpretation.
Ethereal? Is that the word?
Yeah,
there's not an actual point.
So, spoiler alert for the movie Stalker. So, essentially, the whole thing is there are these guys called stalkers who have psychic abilities.
There's the zone, which is a forbidden zone where the aliens creatures at some point did something, but you don't actually see anything related to that. It's just a zone that you can't go into. There's a fence and guards and whatever.
And weirdness.
Yeah. But apparently if you get to a certain point in the middle of the zone...
Called the zone.
Yeah.
You can wish or something.
There's something there that will grant you a wish. And so there are people who are willing to take the risk by hiring these people called stalkers who can guide them through the zone, which is very dangerous.
These people were born or conceived in close proximation to the zone or something like that. And so they have a feeling for where the alien traps are.
Okay, so
they're not traps. Yeah, they're not traps in the literal sense of traps. But
it's all very vague. Like no one knows why the zone is, activated, poisonous. No one knows why the stalkers can navigate it. No one knows what happens if you step on the wrong place when you're not supposed to. It's never really shown, and I actually kind of like that about it because it's like really mysterious. But as it goes on, it just kind of, for me anyway.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But yeah, it's not a traditional sci-fi movie in the sense that they get to a point and it's like they find a spaceship and they go inside. That doesn't happen at all.
They do get to the zone, but they don't step inside.
Yeah, and there's like pretty much nothing there.
Yeah, it's like a mystical place.
Yeah. So last for the 70s, Star Trek: The Motion Picture, 1979. Obviously, after the success of Star Wars, they were like, got to make that Star Trek movie. They had tried to restart the Star Trek series all throughout the 70s and it just wasn't working. They tried to make a Star Trek movie, it just wasn't working. Then Star Wars came out and they're like, finally, we can do it. We got the special effects. People are on board with sci-fi now. And so they made the motion picture, which was based on a script for a pilot episode of a new series, like not a reboot, a continuation series, which you can tell because this movie is notoriously nicknamed the slow motion picture because it's just dragged out. It's an hour-long story dragged out to 2 hours. And so even though it looks really cool and it's actually a really, cool movie, it's just really slow and drawn out and there's just like lots of shots of ships and, stuff. It's just kind of boring.
I'm a massive Star Wars fan,
Star
Trek fan as well. It's still visually beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
Length, it's so hard to watch.
Yeah.
And I often, when I rewatch Star Trek, I often go all the way back to the Wrath of Khan and upwards. And
we'll talk about the Wrath of Khan in a minute.
I'm going to have to put the motion picture on one day while I'm doing the vacuuming.
You can fast forward most of it. But it's not a bad movie, but it does kind of drag it. What's interesting is it's directed by Robert Wise, who directed The Day the Earth Stood Still. Also, one thing we'll probably talk about with the Wrath of Khan, but the one thing they did that hasn't aged well and that I don't like is that they tried to do this late 70s kind of hippie thing where all the uniforms are now kind of like white, kind of not togas, but kind of like tunics or whatever, and they're all kind of like, it's kind of like I didn't like they tried to like make everything, whereas this original series was cheesy, but it had like a very specific look to it, and the movie they tried to make it, I don't know, like a 70s kind of, everyone's kind of cool, and I didn't like that. We still got some time. Should we smash out the 80s? Just smash it all out?
Yeah.
All right. Empire Strikes Back, 1980. Fucking banger. Objectively the best Star Wars movie. Like I've said on the show before, Return of the Jedi is my personal favorite. But when it comes to objective filmmaking, storytelling, Empire Strikes Back is the best.
Yeah.
It also, it's a movie that lives up to the incredible
worth the 3-year wait.
Yeah, it's like we've just been talking for the last half an hour about the influence of Star Wars.
What an agonizing wait it must have been.
The way Star Wars changed the world, and the fact that The Empire Strikes Back lives up to that, that's pretty impressive.
It was an agonising wait, but I mean, being a person who was there at the time, there were little good gap fillers such as Alien. You got to remember these dates are American dates. We see
you got them later,
now where we
that's true.
So and so movie is only 2 weeks after the US release. It wasn't like that. It was a year later.
Yeah,
things like that. So there was some good. There's also some good TV shows. I mean, and then also even guys like me changed direction a little bit. Mad Max.
Yeah.
Wow. Car movie stroke.
Post-apocalyptic.
Yeah. I mean, that was also cool at the time as well.
But I mean, that's the great thing about sci-fi is that it's not just
space.
It's not just spaceships. Yeah, it's like you can have a wide-ranging ideas and that.
Even though, to me personally, space robots and machinery and guns are very, very important in my life, if you will, in my movie life. There are many other things I like. I mean, I know I'm going off just a little bit. I do enjoy the likes of the Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones and Witcher as well.
Yeah.
There wasn't much of that around at that time.
Well, we can do a whole thing on fantasy, 80s fantasy, but that's like a different discussion.
But I got to say, before I forget, that Empire Strikes Back was my top 3 on, the end changing twist, which was that we never left the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
Soylent Green.
Yeah.
We're eating people.
Yeah.
And this one that, I Am Your Father was like... Because we walked out of the cinema and everybody was going...
So shocked.
Anybody standing... There was no standing in line like you see in some of the movies, like, I better not spoil it, because the exits are always different to the entry, rather. But, boy, did we speak about it after, having a pizza afterwards. Or
I mean, we talked about how, before Star Wars, like, Star Wars wasn't a thing, you can't imagine a time before it. It's like, but you can, between Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back is like, that's when it was still called Star Wars 2.
Yeah.
When people were like, what's going to happen, Like, people didn't know. And it's interesting, Dad, because you're here, like, what was the time in between, like, and then when it came out, do you remember, like, what the reaction was? Were people like, this is weird, why is it like this? Or people are like, this isn't what I expected?
Everybody around me, including, we'll even say here, your mother, who's, as you know, is not really much of a sci-fi fan, saw the second one as a continuation of the first one, and that's why the Empire Strikes Back does marry well with the... they can be seen separately, but everybody was waiting for the next installment.
No, but what I'm saying is there wasn't a negative reaction, or there wasn't
none whatsoever.
There wasn't a confusion.
No.
It was just like, Star Wars 2 is dope.
Yeah, there was none. There was no... I would say, if a movie like this had a 99.98 strike rate of people waiting for it to come out, I don't recall anybody having
problems with
negative criticism. Yes, there might have been somebody in one of those...
there's always someone.
I'm sure Tarkovsky
we'll call it, we'll call it the Turek Times that does the critics for the opera. He might have said something bad about,
but in terms of
who reads
all your
anyway.
friends and all that, everyone was like on board.
Thing is, it also we went with several people, and there were ladies with us as well. And everybody loved it. Even your mum, who is not a sci-fi fan at all. Oh, that's nice. But she likes that it had that Han was
romance, adventure,
teasing Leia, and Leia was teasing Han. That's the sort of thing that the right formula.
The through line.
There was no major romance in this. You can't say that.
The Empire Strikes Back is at its heart a romance.
Yes,
because
but it wasn't
about
like
the love
a big
story
lovey-dovey, kissy, long kissing scene. Love story like rom-coms. It wasn't like that.
No.
But it was just enough to satisfy.
But it had something for everyone.
I mean, we went, a few times, but the first time, there was, I think. One of my cousins, one of my other cousins, my sister, my wife, your mother, in other words, and I think even another person on the female gender, and they all,
all loved it.
The testament was what was discussed after the pizza, during the pizza, and having the pizza
dinner afterwards.
That's the testament to what was really liked about that movie.
Flash Gordon, 1980. cheesy as hell, and doesn't live up to Star Wars, which is basically the Flash Gordon movie. But it's fun because it has like a Queen soundtrack, and it's just cheesy fun. But it's kind of funny how the actual legit Flash Gordon movie was just kind of a pale kind of imitation. Yeah, but it's interesting because I feel like if you made a Flash Gordon movie now, people would just accuse it of copying Star Wars, whereas Star Wars was just copying the original 30 serials of Flash Gordon, and the legit Flash Gordon movie from 1980 was just a really cheesy, kind of dodgy-looking, movie.
In actual fact, if they actually, we'll pick on Netflix for the sake of argument here, if they actually did it almost verbatim, but using good technology, probably not too much CGI, and did Flash Gordon again in a series sense, they could probably do a good job with it. The problem with Flash Gordon at that time,
it would need some reworking.
Everybody's remembering the Queen soundtrack.
Yeah.
Remember, the Queen soundtrack was more famous today than it was back then. In the sense of, we went to see this movie, like, what they cheesed it up so much that it really had 4 kinds of cheese thrown in there. It was too cheesy.
I guess that's a good way of putting it, is because Queen. I mean, when was Queen's, like, they were late 70s when they became big.
Yeah.
So they were famous, so you knew who they were. But they, like, it's not like now where people look back on Queen and be like, isn't that cool that Queen did the soundtrack? You were just kind of like, huh? Why is Queen doing the soundtrack?
Yeah, to me, it was, why is Queen doing this soundtrack? It just doesn't make sense.
That's another point as well, is like, bands and musicians didn't really used to do the music for movies until this point. Until this kind of happened.
I'm not saying it was bad, but there was a big question mark. Why is Queen doing this type of soundtrack?
At the time, it was that's an interesting point of view.
But it was way too camp.
It's
cheesy more than camp.
It's fun. It's fun to watch now, but it's like it's not a
it's something that you could put on and walk away from and go get some tea and coffee, go to the toilet, come back, and it's like you're not missing much.
Escape from New York, 1981, absolute classic.
Carpenter,
like John Carpenter. We could just do an episode on John Carpenter like movies.
Yeah.
Just fucking dope. Yeah, like we should. Just awesome, like cool and kind of weird and dark and like dystopian, like crime. Early 80s was like New York was just a crime.
The Warriors.
It's just like
all that kind of
it actually
grunge.
Was in literal sense. It was a crime-ridden, dirty place.
Yeah, so it's like, and then to make a sci-fi movie where you're just like taking it to its logical conclusion, where it's like, well, New York's just a prison now, because it's like in real life it's a shithole. Let's just make the sci-fi dystopian version set. I think it's set in the late 90s, and it's like, let's just ham it up.
Yeah.
It's awesome. Mad Max 2, 1981, aka The Road Warrior. One of my favorite movies of all time. Absolute fucking banger. Just classic. Like, so good. All right. Ready for this? Blade Runner, 1982.
Yeah. One of the best movies ever made. Prove me wrong.
I mean,
oh my God.
Here's the thing, is when the movie came out, it was the theatrical version, which has a really awkward, terrible voiceover.
It's our dad's favourite version.
Oh, your dad's are wrong. It's got the crappy, happy ending plugged onto the end. It's like cut out all the cool, juicy bits from the middle of the story. And it didn't do well upon first release, and people didn't like it.
Which is a shame.
Then I think the early 90s, I think there was the director's cut where Ridley Scott, he didn't supervise it, but he approved a version that was closer to his vision of like getting rid of the happy ending, getting rid of the narration, inserting some of the stuff that they cut out. And then it wasn't until 2007, the final cut.
That's so late.
Where Ridley Scott came back and oversaw the definitive his version, really cleaning it up till it's like, that's what Blade Runner is. So when I say Blade Runner is a great movie, what I'm actually talking about is the final cut.
It's a slow burn. I have to agree with you. When I watched it for the second time, I kind of, when they got altered a little bit,
the director's cut.
The director's cut, I appreciated it then.
Yeah.
But I also probably grew into that movie a little bit. You know, when you see a movie once at a movie, you go home and you go, I don't know what I was watching.
Yeah, it's a movie that it makes sense that it didn't do well at first, and that it's doing, got better and better, and it's doing well now. About it. Yeah, because it's not an easy movie to like. It's dark and weird.
A hard-boiled detective story brought forward 1,000 years.
Yeah, it's neo-noir, but also it's got these weird android things.
That's why I'm going to mention...
Cyberpunk wasn't really a thing, so it might have gone over
an entire genre of science fiction.
That's another thing, yeah. It's like before this, cyberpunk wasn't even really a subgenre, wasn't even a thing.
So it would have gone over people's heads a little bit.
Yeah, kind of like Star Wars. It's like Ridley Scott created a look to a dystopian, futuristic city that pretty much every movie after this copied.
Yeah.
Like every movie with a futuristic city after Blade Runner was just like they were trying to copy Blade Runner.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
even
like
the Reach the Reach even went as far as the Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah. I mean, yeah,
as ridiculous as that sounds.
Yeah, they got the guy who did the production design for Blade Runner to do the production design for the city in.
Well, that's one of the things that's most really impressive about Blade Runner is the sets.
Yeah. Like that, you can walk into the screen and live in that world. It's such a rich, detailed, tangible world. And it's just a really.
And it's got CG in it, but it didn't age that terribly.
It's not too bad. It's still
not
there's
really.
spaceships and stuff.
They're practical.
They're toys. They're little figures.
They're miniatures.
The only quote unquote CGI is like the vector graphics on the screens of when they're landing and stuff. But otherwise, I mean, and in the final cut, there's a little bit of CGI touch-ups, backgrounds, eyes. But other than that, no, it's all practical. And that's another reason why it's so impressive.
See, that movie, I have to say, on my perspective of watching it for the first time, rewatching it, and now watching it a few more times, I enjoy it more as I've watched it.
Yeah, it gets better. It gets better every time.
4 times.
Yeah,
all up. I haven't said I've watched it 17 times. Probably 4, but I enjoy it. I think my understanding has got a little bit better of it, and
it's a movie that gets, I think, better as time goes by.
We're also kind of lucky that sometimes they'll play it at Hoyt's.
That was one time because of the anniversary.
Yeah. But I'm hoping that'll come around again.
Hopefully, yeah.
It's like I was trying to say before about giving The Expanse another go.
Yeah.
It's because the first time it gets you, huh? What?
Yeah.
Then when you watch it again, it's like your concentration level just deepens into it a little bit. Now I understand what's going on there.
We were talking about this before we started recording. I have issues with The Expanse because of the sort of the gap between the seasons initially.
Yeah.
It was like
but now that they're all out.
Now they're all out, I can binge watch and I'll be fine. But initially that 3-year gap between season 1 and 2, I just couldn't remember what had happened. Yeah. I didn't want to watch it all ever again.
Yeah.
And as I was saying to James before, the beauty about Netflix and Amazon and things like that is that you can. I watch 2.5 episodes and I'm wiping my eyes and I'm sleepy, but at least it stops.
Yeah, and they can pick up. Yeah,
I might maybe rewind it 1 minute.
Yeah,
but
to remember where you
were. It's really good that way.
You can take it at your own pace.
I understand that sometimes the gap between the first season and the next season come on.
But now I've got enough of a buffer. I think I'll be fine.
Yeah, but watch it. It's. I'm not going to put it in the category of Blade Runner. However, it is.
It has some of those elements from what I remember.
A little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely like we said with Star Wars with Blade Runner. Everything after that takes inspiration. So The Expanse.
I remember some city scenes in The Expanse is very Blade Runner, very
so 1982 was a good year for sci-fi because in addition to Blade Runner, you had E.T., you had Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan, you had The Thing, and Tron. So
that's a pretty
good year for sci-fi. E.T. obviously absolute classic.
Spielberg at his cheesiest.
Just so good. Like a more positive kind of sci-fi. Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan. This is where Star Trek movies got good and serious, and they kind of reinvented themselves as that kind of military, Navy uniform, the tactics and all that. And this is always the movie that is Wrath of Khan is the Star Trek movie, and it's the one that even non-Star Trek fans like.
Yeah.
It's just a good action movie. Yeah.
Sonia liked it a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
Mum hates Star Trek.
No, but she liked it because it had passion
What? I didn't know this.
Khan. So Khan was to her...
I don't believe it. I'm going to ask her. She's going to deny it. She's going to deny it.
Because no,
she's going to deny
maybe
it.
Now she'll deny it. But the fact that when we went to see it, she goes, Khan was the most passionate thing.
Oh, Ricardo Montalban's is the best villain.
See, the thing is, there was what they call an opposing character, which she liked.
Yeah.
Her complaint is that she thinks that they're all just talking to a mirror.
Yeah, there's no tension.
There's no tension in anything.
Yeah. So John Carpenter's The Thing, absolute fucking amazing movie. One of the...
Special effects king.
Yeah, amazing special effects, just like really tense,
really
paranoid.
Terrifying film.
Terrifying. Still probably like... I mean, I don't know if I have a favourite horror movie, but this would probably be it.
My question for you, James. Who was the thing at the end?
Oh, probably Childs, but who knows? We could do a whole episode on that.
I like the subject, though.
Yeah.
And, like, it almost comes around, it's almost relevant today with global warming and, like, ice caps melting. Not in the fact that there's an alien hiding under the ice, but bacteria and viruses and other life forms that haven't existed here in millions of years could potentially
I mean, the thing is that it crashed and got frozen, and then they uncovered it, and no one knows how long it was there.
That sort of idea that there's, like...
Yeah. But it's such an effective movie, and no CGI, just amazing special effects. The stuff they do, still, I'm like, how did they do that?
Yeah.
Also,
and it's so scary and creepy and gory. And
also, an all-time best X-Files episode borrows heavily from this.
Yeah, rips off more like.
Yeah, rips off.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
I think it does. Yeah.
There's more than a few X-Files episodes where they're just like, and then they get trapped and there's a virus. Yeah. But the first one,
it's a good episode, but it's basically just X-Files presents The Thing.
Yeah.
Pardon the pun like this. I'm not a big fan of viruses and fan of that genre.
Yeah.
And The Thing is also part of that thing that I don't like. However, the like you said, the creature that sort of just turns morphs, in on its, that's very, very clever. Yeah.
Tron, I fucking love this movie.
Cool movie.
I don't give a fuck what anyone says. I love it. It's so cheesy.
It's peak 80s.
It's like very early CGI where they were like experimenting. Where like, can we get away with this? Like, what can we do? It still looks pretty good. Like, obviously, the CGI is very, what's the word? Rudimentary? Is that the word I'm looking for?
Yeah.
But it works because they're going inside the computer. And
but this is also, if I may add to somebody who was there, this was at the height of the Atari video game that you found in... You went and spent your money and put the
arcades,
coins in.
Pac-Man,
your Pac-Man and your, what is Space Invaders?
Yeah, Space Invaders, yeah.
It was just after that, but it was right at the right time.
Yeah.
Everybody loved that type of video game that looked like Tron as well.
Yeah, I mean...
Right time, right place, right...
Yeah, it was like taking that Pac-Man fever and like making a sci-fi movie about it, but also making like a cool...
It's so cool. Yeah. That's probably on Disney Plus too.
Yeah, it is, yeah. Return of the Jedi, 1983. Fucking love it. Don't care what anyone says. Yeah, it has Ewoks. They're not that big of a problem. They're cute.
They're fine, yeah.
They're fine. They don't ruin the movie. There's only a bit in the middle where it gets a bit bogged down because they have to get introduced to Ewoks. Other than that, the movie's fucking amazing.
Yeah.
Videodrome, 1983.
Yes.
Awesome.
There was a lot of Cronenberg movies on this list I had to cut out just for time, but I had to leave Videodrome. It's so weird. It's so disgusting.
I watched it for the first time last year, and it's crazy.
But I think, like a lot of these movies, and like all great sci-fi movies, it's more relevant now than it was back then. And it's kind of very forward-thinking. I mean,
is this one of the first types of movies that really delves sort of into, I would say, I'm not going to say it shares similarities with something like 8mm, but it's sort of like forbidden sort of channels or like almost snuff.
It's probably one of the first movies that deals with like the idea of like television or being able to broadcast
anything you
want
and controlling people, kind of
and this is like 20 years before the internet was even a thing.
Because before it all goes insane, an early point in the movie, like the main character played by James Woods, basically, that he runs like a basic cable channel where they try to get the most sort of
messed up,
intense,
dirty,
horror, messed up, like horror and sort of shock films.
Yeah,
and they think they're showing like actual murder or something. And it's like, but people want to pay for it because they want the violence.
Yeah.
And so I feel like it's one of the first movies that earliest movies that I've seen that sort of deals with that.
Cronenberg's definitely one of the first directors who's like makes sci-fi movies, but that are about those kinds of things, like being
people's
more
addiction to violence.
Yeah, being more like edgy and not just the sci-fi ideas that we've been talking about. But then he was like the first one is like what's the psychological aspect and how technology and flesh
and it's a very effective
will eventually probably combine, and how people's minds are already affected by technology.
It's science fiction horror, but you don't know what's real and what's not, and it's still a little bit.
Well, it also has one of the greatest quotes of all time. Long live the new flesh. I don't know what it means, but I love it.
The new flesh, I guess, is the TV signal, or
there's also the really cool practicals, like the breathing television.
The effects,
and for lack of a better word, the penis gun.
Yeah, the taking the gun out of his like chest vagina or whatever the fuck. Like, amazing. Just weird. Just crazy.
It's so cool.
So 1984 was an absolute incredible year for sci-fi. You've got The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. You've got Dune. You've got Ghostbusters, Gremlins, The Last Starfighter, 1984, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, Starman, and The Terminator.
My goodness.
All 1984. Just absolute incredible year. Dune, of course, there's a new one coming out soon.
A lot of people don't like the 1984 one. I love it.
Yeah, the Lynch version is not the best adaptation, but that book is so hard to adapt.
Yeah.
And what Lynch does with the effects are amazing.
Yeah.
And I really like it.
His interpretation of the Guild is so weird and awesome, and like they come in this big train thing.
The weird alien thing.
And they're floating in the liquid, and it's just so weird.
It's so good.
And the costume design is also great. Also Sting.
Yeah, it's so it's also so different from like Star Wars. Like obviously the original Star Wars takes so much inspiration from the novel Dune, and then the movie obviously would take inspiration from Star Wars movie. Even though Lynch probably would say it didn't, but just in the way the technology evolved
passively,
everyone who worked on it, exactly. Everyone who worked on it would have been influenced.
Lynch might not have cared, but it's people who worked around. Lynch
but I think what's great about it.
Didn't even read the book.
Yeah, but I think what's great about it is that it's so different from Star Wars.
Yeah, for sure.
Like it feels like its own weird thing. Ghostbusters, obviously, we don't know.
But if I may interject there, everybody who went to Dune, me included, were expecting to see a Star Wars, and didn't get it.
I think that's one of the reasons.
I appreciated this movie as I saw it again and again.
That's one of the reasons it didn't do well, and people generally don't like it.
What the hell's this?
That's like when you have David Lynch in charge.
Yeah, that's what you get.
I even said this afternoon I'd like to see it again with now an older mind.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting,
particularly before the next one.
It'll be interesting to see what happens when the new one comes out, because I'm assuming that one will be more accurate to the book. But whether it'll be an actually really good movie,
look, to be fair, a lot of people didn't like 1984's Dune. Last year, I introduced some of our friends to this movie. They watched it for the first time, and they were like, "That sucked." I'm like sitting there with a smile, like, isn't this great? And they're like, no.
It also depends on what end of the spectrum of like how much do you love Lynch, we're like all the way turned it up to 11. Ghostbusters, don't even have to talk about it. Just
amazing,
absolute classic. Like just the idea. I think the idea is just really good behind it. The execution is perfect, but it's an interesting idea. Like, what if you call an exterminator but for ghosts?
Yeah.
And they have their own little technology and traps.
Yeah, it's such a fun movie, and just all the elements work. You know, all the cast, and it's just so good. Gremlins, classic, really fun, kind of dark. One of the movies responsible for the PG-13 rating, because it was like too dark and violent for a PG, but they didn't want to give it an R because it's a kids movie.
I watched it recently and I like it, but I'm always stuck on how old is he meant to be?
Who, the main guy?
Yeah.
He's like 20.
He's like 20, but he looks so young.
I don't know.
I'm like, he looks like 15, but he's like, no, he's working a job. I'm just like, okay.
He works in a bank. The Last Starfighter, rewatched this again last night. Absolute classic. So much fun. This is also a movie where they started trying to introduce the CGI things, where they're like, every time there's a space battle, it'll be CGI. And obviously now it looks kind of dated. but they only use it for the space battles. Otherwise, all the aliens, all the interiors of the spaceships, all the sets, all the locations, it's all practical. And it still looks incredible. And then when you have the spaceships fighting, yeah, they look like a bit of dodgy CGI, but it actually works pretty well. And they don't try to bite off more than they can chew. They work pretty well within their boundaries.
This was also probably I would say the tail end of the popularity still on the Atari.
Yeah, same with the Tron thing. It's like it's basically
Space Invader.
Yeah, the Pac-Man fever thing is like, what if you went into a video game was Tron? It's like, what if the video game was used as a recruiting tool for a real intergalactic war? Like, it's like a kid fantasy kind of thing.
Well, even in the video game, now I was already a little bit older, so I kind of just missed the video game craze. I would play it from time to time. You put your coin in a table and play it.
Yeah.
But this was sort of the second version answer to, say, Tron, where, remember Space Invaders, that the Space Invaders would come down as slowly, and then they would speed up. Then the second version came out, where the things were much faster.
Yeah.
I forgot what they were called. That the ships would then separate out.
Yeah, Gallagher.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, that was faster.
Yeah.
So everybody got into the faster.
Yeah. You also had Asteroids, which is like an earlier one.
Yeah. Everybody got sick of the slower version and then jumped straight onto that. Look how much faster it was. And The Last Starfighter was kind of that era.
Yeah.
It was a faster
it's a really good
game.
movie, and I think it's. I don't know if it's fair to say that it's maybe not as well known as some of the other ones we've been talking about. Like, people have heard of it.
I'd say that's fair.
But how many people have actually seen it?
Probably today, maybe not.
Yeah, like it's
Back
definitely
in the
worth.
80s,
It's definitely worth watching. It's like a really 80s classic. 1984.
It's objectively an amazing movie, but I think we studied it a lot at school and it killed my love for this movie.
I think the 1984 version of 1984 is an incredible movie.
It is an incredible movie, but I can't bring myself
you couldn't ask for a better adaptation. Yeah. You also couldn't ask for a movie being based in 1984, being made in 1984, and actually being like really good.
Here's where me and Nathan differ. We had to study it in school, but I love the book.
Oh yeah,
and I love the movie.
Yeah, I remember. Like, I think we bought the book for school, and then I went out and bought another copy that had a better cover because I liked the book so much.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like we've been talking about this entire episode, it's much more relevant now than it was back then when they were in the Cold War, which is pretty fucked up when you think about it.
It was a very concerning movie for us because there was a lot of truths to the fact that this might happen to us.
Yeah. I
forgot the title of the movie.
Which one?
It's there was a nuclear war movie that came out around that time.
War Games?
No, not Day After Tomorrow.
That's another one. I think that was 84 as well.
Yeah.
War Games.
Anyway, I forgot the title right at the moment, but it was right at that. There was a possibility of.
Yeah. But in terms
the Reagan, Star Wars, type of thing, we were going to probably end up that way.
But in terms of like surveillance and like, propaganda and like what is truth, that is more, especially with the internet, because
and Fox
keep in mind,
like
when was the book written? Like 49, roughly?
Something
so,
like that.
Keep in mind, the internet was not even a twinkle in anyone's eye. No one could even conceive of it.
No.
So now the fact that a lot of the stuff is coming true now, it's like, pretty crazy. Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, not great, bit slow, suffers from not having Spock in it because they have to go find him. But it's okay. It's fun to watch. Starman, this is a really good one. Another Carpenter one.
Never seen it.
It's really good. Yeah. It's a really good like human story. Like it's not about the laser guns or anything. It's really about the characters.
The Starman probably is deceiving the fact that it might have laser guns and what have you.
It's kind of like E.T., but Jeff Bridges is the alien
human version of it.
It's a really good movie. And the Terminator. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Just classic.
Another movie with almost no reference point.
Yeah, this is another movie that's actually a good point. After this, everything similar was influenced by it.
Yeah.
Anything with a killer robot, anything with an android was influenced by the Terminator.
The closest thing would have been, of course, Westworld.
Westworld,
Westworld,
Blade Runner a little bit.
Yeah.
Westworld using the Terminator. But
also,
still,
also the Terminator had like
different.
Also the Terminator was cool because it had like the future scenes and then a time travel element and then the killer robot.
It ticked a few boxes.
Hiding as a human in the present.
You have your almost laser battles in the future scenes.
Yeah,
time
and
travel.
It's like go back.
The sort of thriller horror element.
Yeah, and the first movie is much more of a horror movie than the second movie.
Yeah, much.
Back to the Future, 1985.
Awesome.
One of my personal favorites.
Classic. Can't beat it.
Good.
It's like every time I watch it, I'm like, it's a weird movie because there's certain scenes where I'm like, oh yeah, and there's no real like bad guy. Like there's Biff, but there's no real villain.
Yeah.
There's no real, and I'm just like, this is a perfect movie.
Do you know they're releasing 4K this year apparently?
Ooh.
I got the Blu-ray box set that looks like a flux capacitor, and you turn it on, that it lights up. But I want to get the 4K, but
apparently they're releasing it this year, like a trilogy box set.
But it's just
4K.
It's like the perfect movie. Like I don't know what it is about
influenced things as well.
It's a very good movie.
It's like magic.
You can walk past the TV 3/4 into that movie and still sit down on the couch and just continue watching it from.
It's like you have to start watching it if it's on. You have to start.
And like what Andre was talking about before, you can watch any of those movies independently.
Yeah,
but they also work really well together.
2 and 3 are good.
A lot of people watch them like 3/4 of the way through the movie. Just say, "Oh, you just walked in the lounge room and the movie's on. I'm going to sit down and watch the rest of it."
A lot of people hate.
You got a knowledge of what's gone, and it still holds up very well.
Looks so good.
Oh yeah,
it looks
the effects are so good.
One of the first movies when we got our projector setup going, one of the first movies we tested was a Back to the Future movie.
Number 3.
Number 3, and it looked amazing.
Yeah, they're so good, and just the style and the music and like all that, like and the characters, and it's just so funny and like classic.
All the elements gelled in that one.
Yeah. And the time travel elements, of course, time travel had been a thing.
I mean, time travel, but with cars.
Yeah, it's like it had been the thing before, but it's like finally, it's like a time machine that was like really cool.
And like DeLoreans.
Yeah, and also, it influenced probably every other time travel movie after that.
And the time travel was quite lineal that even my wife understood it. You know what I mean? It didn't confuse my wife to say, "Oh, I didn't know what the hell was going on."
Yeah, they do a good job of explaining. And it helps that Doc Brown like explains it and
and of course in the second one when he gets the blackboard out and that helps.
Yeah.
I'm talking to the layman.
Yeah. I mean,
it does help.
Brazil, 1985. This is a really good movie, really weird movie, and it takes a lot from 1984. It's basically like a 1984, but weirder version. I highly recommend it. Like just weird Terry Gilliam goodness.
Seen it.
It's so good. It's like imagine 1984, but like more
colorful,
more quirky. Yeah, but it also really dark as well. Like it doesn't shy away from the darkness, but it also has like more of a colorful, cartoony nature. Cocoon, 1985, good classic. Movie. Like great sci-fi idea. Doesn't have to have lots of rocket ships and laser guns. It's all about the idea. Enemy Mine, 1985. This is one of Dad's favorites. This is a really interesting movie. Again, comes down to the idea of like the alien enemy and the human pilot getting trapped on the abandoned planet, the barren planet, and like having to work together to survive and becoming friends and learning about each other. Classic movie. Yeah, it's about the friendship and the characters. It's not even really about the lasers and that.
No, that's a very, very small portion of the movie. And in fact, I think it's only about 5-10 minutes.
It's like the start where they get shot down, and then at the end when they get rescued or quote unquote rescued by those junkers, and they shoot them. And
I'm sure that maybe whether it's an old Star Trek episode or something from Outer Limits or whatever, you might have addressed this. Yeah,
they've done similar things.
This movie was like, the relationship grew in front of your eyes, and it really became really deep as the movie went along. Very, very human element for a space movie.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, I won't spoil the end. The end has even got a twist.
Yeah, it's a really good movie. I recommend it.
Yeah.
Explorers, 1985. This is a lot of fun. Not a great movie, but I think it's one of those classic adventure, kids movies where it's like, oh, they create a spaceship and they go and they fly and they find an alien guy and he's really funny, and it's a fun movie. I recommend it. Aliens, 1986.
How can you top Alien?
And fucking Cameron, he did it. I mean, if you ask me what's your favorite, Alien or Aliens, I still don't know. I still can't choose.
Like, Alien is objectively a perfect horror movie for the time.
Yeah, but Aliens is an objectively perfect action movie for the time. Like, like it's like he, and what's great about it is he took Alien, he's like, I'm not just going to do another horror movie set in a spaceship. He's like, I'm going to make a war movie or an action movie. Whereas Alien was a haunted house movie, Aliens was like a Vietnam movie.
Yeah. I think if I had to pick one, I probably would pick Aliens.
Aliens, I think, especially for like younger people,
it's a better viewing experience.
It's more like gung ho, like fun, action.
It is a more fun movie. It's a more fun movie to watch than Alien. But is it a better movie?
It's also interesting because it's like different filmmaker, and considering Alien 3 and Alien 4 and the rest of the movies that came after, it's like he did something so different and yet stayed true to the original and just kind of developed the world more, like kind of grew the world more, and just so good. And the effects to this day, I'm still like, why don't movies look like this anymore? Yeah. When you see an action movie now, it's all CGI nonsense. I'm like, why don't they just go back to Aliens and watch what they did and do that? Yeah. It's kind of annoying, Yeah.
That ticked off everything in my box as well. Now, I have to say before I jump onto Aliens, Alien and Aliens can be watched separately, and or in sequence, or you can even watch them back to front if you like. However, it ticked off every box. Spaceships, drop
Space
ship,
Marines,
tank,
machine guns,
good machine guns,
a cat,
a cat.
Actually, that was,
something different.
Machinery, even an android.
Oh yeah,
androids. Yes.
Oh yeah. Actually, the androids in both movies are really interesting. The way they deal with that.
Forklift. Which
load
was very
lifter,
clever. The Loadmaster thing was forklift without wheels. Wow.
Yeah.
That's
and it's like
really,
it's like an exoskeleton. That's cool.
That sort of got the robot side of me, but it ticked every box I had.
Now we've got to go watch Aliens.
Oh man, it's so good. Flight of the Navigator, 1986. Dad, this is one you really liked.
This is actually a kid's movie, but I think it's just visually beautiful.
Yeah, it's got that last E.T., Last Starfighter kind of sense of 80s kids adventure, but it's like really, really fun.
It's got some dark elements to it, like it's the music that kind of does it.
Also, the idea again, sci-fi, great ideas. The kid gets abducted by aliens, and then when he gets dropped back off to Earth, like how many, like 5, 6, 7 years have gone past on Earth.
Have you guys seen it?
No. But you can spoil it.
I mean, but that's just the general premise.
Yeah, because the alien abduction, see, the reason why I asked them if they've seen it is not what you think.
Yeah, but I'm just saying in terms of the general premise, just to get it out of the way, is he gets abducted. When he gets put back on Earth, he's like, a few minutes have gone past. He goes to his house, and it's like 7 years, and he's still the kid. And now his little brother is now an older brother.
Which company made this? Was it Disney?
No.
I think it's MGM or something.
It would have been Paramount.
Or MGM or something.
I got it on DVD. I can give it to you.
But it's worth a watch.
Yeah, it's really
got
fun.
Some very good visual.
You like it because one, the spaceship. You like it because the spaceship, but the spaceship also has like an AI robot inside it.
Yeah.
Who like tells the kid what to do. So it's like. It's for Dad. It's like double. I
got a double whammy out of the spaceship, and the spaceship is clever.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's different. It's sort of like, I'll spoil a little bit for you. It's like Terminator 2, the liquid metal.
T1000.
T1000. Borrowed a little bit from that. Is it?
No, that's 5, 6 years before.
Also, it doesn't borrow from that. In actual fact, it's sort of slightly.
It has that sleek metal, that design. But that's a really cool, fun movie. The Fly, 1986, another Cronenberg. This is like a remake of a 1958 kind of cheesy B movie. But The Fly, the Cronenberg 80s version, is just fucking like great body horror, and Cronenberg just like knows
and his body horror.
Yeah, and he like I said, he knows how to get into that psychological of like what would actually really happen if you were started turning into a fly creature. Short Circuit, 1986. I fucking love this movie.
I liked it. I loved them as children. I haven't seen them in a long time.
But Short Circuit 2, 1988, I think that's even better. I fucking love that movie. It's so cool. It's so cool. Star Trek 4, The Voyage Home, 1986. This is actually one of the best Star Trek movies. Some people call it Star Trek Save the Whales because it's like there's like no real bad guy. It's another time travel movie where they go to 20th century Earth and it's about like saving like the environment. It's actually really good.
It's not bad. Yeah, it's pretty good.
It's like one of the best Star Trek movies. And what's great about Star Trek is it's not like Star Wars. It's not about the fighting. It's about the idea and the moral dilemma.
Yeah.
And that's why it's such a great movie. And it's also one that's kind of more humorous, but it's not slapsticky or dumb or anything. Really good movie. Inner Space, 1987. Classic. Hilarious.
I haven't seen it. It's available on one of my streaming services.
Great special effects. You know, when you think of like sci-fi comedy, sometimes the sci-fi side gets let down because you got the comedy side. So it's like, oh, well, the comedy picks up, so it's like, you don't matter that it doesn't look so great. But Inner Space has the best, like Ghostbusters. Great special effects, great ideas. And so the comedy,
into that space.
The comedy and the, the sci-fi
it's
stuff.
It's kind of based off loosely of an old 60s
Fantastic
series.
Voyage.
Fantastic Voyage.
Yeah, I had to cut that from my list.
But so if you're familiar with that, then you got a bit of an idea. But it's Inner Space because he gets
inside.
For you.
I know it's a voyage in the human body.
Inside the human body. But Predator, 1987.
Another classic.
Another banger. Like,
go Arnie.
Action horror.
I think for people our age, you've got like the Predators, the Aliens, you've got those kind of movies where it's just like
watch the early ones, avoid the later ones.
But it's like still like that shit kind of speaks to us and stands up so well. Yeah, it's just like best action movie.
The soundtrack
but also
on that is so damn good.
Yeah, so good. But also like really cool like interesting sci-fi ideas like the alien and the hunting culture and all that stuff. Yeah. That's really cool.
You know, when she talks about the hottest summer, you actually feel the heat.
Yeah.
That's how good descriptive
That's why the first movie's still the best. Like the way it's like, we were talking about the sci-fi movies where the first half an hour or whatever is the best, where it's like a slowly introduced. It's like, that's what I love about Predator. It's like the way you slowly introduce. It's like shit doesn't hit the fan until later.
Yeah.
And that's
I love
great.
that. I love that world building.
Yeah, and it's like what's that thing in the trees? What's watching him? It's that really cool stuff.
Most of my favourite movies all are like that. They're slow burn. A lot of people will get up and walk out of the cinema 15 minutes later when they don't wait for the payoff.
Yeah, a lot of the later movies, the 2000s movies, they just move too fast and they're kind of dumb.
They're trying to pay it off in the first 5 minutes.
Yeah, because people's attention span.
Star Wars.
The new Star Wars. Yeah, it's people's attention spans or whatever. Yeah. They're just.
It's like I rewatched. I know it's a little bit later in this, but I rewatched Jurassic Park recently, the first one, and like the first half an hour of that, it's just slow world building. It's just
all
so
about
effective.
all about the wonder and
it's just like that wonder, that delight. The sort of the intrigue, and it doesn't hit the fan until later on. Yeah. And it's very effective. It still holds up today.
Yeah,
but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. So we only got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to smash through the rest, and then you guys just interject if you have something important to say. RoboCop, 1987,
cool as shit.
One of my favorite movies of all time. Unironically, I think it's one of the greatest movies of all time. It's probably my top 3, top 5 movies. It's fucking incredible. Just amazing movie, great satire, more relevant now than it was back then. Yeah. Just really, Paul Verhoeven just fucking violent.
Not the ABC presenter.
No one knows who you're talking about, Callum. No one knows. The Dutch filmmaker Paul Verhoeven, who made RoboCop and Starship Troopers, which we'll talk about maybe next week. RoboCop, incredible. Yeah, bringing a European sensibility to an American action movie.
Yeah.
Amazing. The Running Man, 1987, cheesy as hell, but really fun.
Yeah.
A murder game show, Arnie, really cool. Spaceballs, 1987. Mel Brooks, sending up Star Wars 4. Yeah, it's objectively a better Star Wars movie than all the Star Wars movies that came after.
Unfortunately, it seems to have influenced the Star Wars movies going forward.
Yeah,
it probably did too.
Yeah, because it seems like unfortunately, Whereas Mel Brooks was deliberately parodying Star Wars, they're like unintentionally parodying Star Wars. Akira, 1988.
Classic anime. Must watch for all animation fans.
I had to cut out a lot of anime and animated films, sci-fi films, because of time and that. But I had to add this one because it's just so influential and was, very, very influenced by Blade Runner. The city in Akira is basically the city in...
It wouldn't exist without Blade Runner.
No, but it's such a weird, cool movie. Alien Nation, 1988, another really cool movie with a cool idea about aliens who come to Earth, and it's kind of like an immigration allegory or whatever, where there's like a alien who becomes a cop and has to partner with the human. Really cool movie. Yeah. They Live, 1988, again Carpenter, genre god. Really cool, really fun idea, kind of lighthearted, but also kind of dark. Again, another more message that's more relevant now than it was back then. The Abyss, 1989. This is a movie that unfortunately was never released on Blu-ray. It was released on DVD once, but on a shitty non-anamorphic transfer. And generally across of James Cameron's filmography, people overlook this one. It is one of the best, most interesting sci-fi movies ever made. I also should mention that the theatrical version is pretty shit and the director's cut extended version is the best version. So that's another reason people kind of overlook it, because if they saw the theatrical version, they're like, what the hell is this? But the director's cut of The Abyss, incredible sci-fi movie, really weird, really different. And yeah, I hope eventually it does get a proper Blu-ray or 4K release, and then you'll start to see people talking about it.
If I may
you'll start to see people saying, this is great.
Sorry. There are some movies that in life that I think as you get 10 years older, you should rewatch it with a 10-year-older brain.
Yeah,
you'll get much more enjoyment out of some of these movies than you just go in the cinema and go, huh?
A lot of these movies...
Because a lot of it can go over your head quickly in the cinema, just at that day.
A lot of these movies reward repeat viewings, especially this one. Also in 1989, there was like a trend of like deep sea movies. Deep Star 6 and Leviathan also came out that movie. I hate swimming. I hate the sea. Yeah, I love deep sea like horror exploration movies.
Watch the Meg.
Fucking no, that shit like Deep Blue Sea. I don't like that shit where it gets too CGI and dumb. Yeah. I like the like real practical. Like they go in the sea.
Serious movies.
Yeah, like I fucking love that because the sea is basic. Like what is it like? 90% of it has not been explored.
Yeah.
Like there are points that are so deep and dark and so much pressure
that
you can't go there. But
the life under there is like completely alien.
Yeah, and if you did get there, it would be like going to outer space. And if you were to step out of your submarine in one of these points, it would be like stepping out into outer space.
The pressure will crush you instantly.
But if you could, the Abyss addresses
Whereas
this with liquid oxygen.
More easy to do because the pressures they're constant.
Well, there's pressure problems,
whatever pressure it might be is.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying is,
whereas
it's interesting to think about that there are points on our planet right now that are so alien and foreign and weird and dangerous that we can't even go near them.
Yeah, such as gooberfish or.
Yeah, and if we were to go explore them, it would be like going to the far reaches of space. Back to the Future Part 2. A lot of people don't like this movie, 1989. It's fucking great.
Yeah.
I love the weird, dark Biff world.
I love the fact that they based him on Donald Trump in this movie.
Yeah, Biff takes over the city, and it's like really dark and kind of violent and weird. I love it. I also like how they don't just repeat the first movie, but it's like, because it's a time travel movie, they go back to the first movie, but now it's a different timeline and he sees himself and he sees, like, it's really cool, interesting, and the way they had to reshoot things and...
It's really interesting.
It's really well done. Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, 1989.
One of the greatest movies ever made.
Easy. Classic. So much fun.
Travel movie.
So many good quotes.
So many good lines. And like the idea of like going back through history and collecting real life historical figures.
How else are they going to learn how to pass this?
Yeah, I mean, that's the best way to learn.
We're not going to study.
I love also
But see, if they don't, then the world will be a terrible place because they don't write their song.
Yeah, that's
Don't you see?
I love the dialogue in this film, like calling Socrates Socrates.
Socrates, yeah, it's
just
so
stuff
good.
like that. Just love it.
Yeah, and like who's Napoleon eats the ice cream or whatever, and he gets obsessed with it. I can't remember now. So good. Ghostbusters 2, 1989. A lot of people hate this movie. I love it. It's fine, nowhere near as good as the first, but it's still a great movie.
It's still good, yeah.
It's still a decent sequel.
Yeah, it has a lot of great moments. It's really funny. I like that villain. The villain's different, you know. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, 1989.
I haven't seen that in years.
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, it's a kids movie, but it's fucking fun.
They're making a new one.
Yeah, I know, and Rick Moranis is coming out of
retirement. Coming back for Disney.
So
the visual effects in this movie are quite good.
Yeah,
you know, it is a kids' movie, yes, but the visual effects are very, very good.
The practical effects and the whole, like, you know, the whole making the small world giant, like giant blades of grass, and like a puddle is like an ocean. Like that's really cool. And like he rides the ant.
Reference to the Land of the Giants, which was in the 1960s series. It was so much better in the sense of, you know, that's where the visuals should have been. Technology has changed.
Like, you know, you're watching Ant-Man, it's like, yeah, it's kind of cool, but you can see it's just CGI. Yeah. Whereas, like, watching something like this, it's like...
They actually shrunk Rick Moranis.
Yeah. You can see it's like they actually built a living, like, miniature, like, gigantic world, you know, and then put people in it so they look small. It's really cool. And last for 1989, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. The worst Star Trek movie until
Is this the one about God?
Yeah.
Don't know spoilers because I haven't seen this.
Yeah, so I don't. If you don't want spoilers, but yeah, pretty much it's just silly. It's a waste. William Shatner directed it. He just wanted. He's like Leonard Nimoy directed Star Trek 3 and 4. Well, I want to direct a Star Trek movie. Yeah. And so he made Star Trek 5.
And spat the dummy on that one.
It sucked.
It does lead into being a little bit religious, but...
yeah, I won't spoil it for Callum, but there are two main things where it's just like, come on now.
Yeah.
But yeah, the start of the movie is actually really interesting because it's kind of a bit dark for a Star Trek movie. There's like this barren planet where people don't use phasers. They use like projectile weapons. And the atmosphere is really dangerous, like radiation heavy or whatever. It's really cool. And then it kind of just shits itself.
Yeah.
Can't believe he wrote his own books.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Where Kirk lives.
He wrote all these Star Trek. He wrote all these sci-fi books called Tech War or something, which were probably ghost written by another author, and then he put his name on it.
I bought one a few weeks ago for $2 at a...
We're at this secondhand bookstore and there's like all these Star Trek books and Dad's like, William Shatner wrote this one. I'm like, yeah, he wrote a whole bunch of them, or he quote unquote wrote. So I mean, we'll end it up there. Maybe next week we'll come back and we'll do 1990 to present day.
That'd be good.
But yeah, that's. I mean, like I said, I had to cut out so many movies. A lot of B movies had to cut out. A lot of bigger name classics. You know, they had to cut out. And some movies that might have been worth mentioning, but that I just don't like. So I was just like, getting rid of you. But I think we got most of the main ones.
I think so. We did well.
Even with me, who wanted to concentrate this list together with James more on, you know, robots and spaceships and what have you. I think in that section of 1950 to 1960, there was so many B grade, C grade.
Oh yeah, I've got a list here of all this, like some of the stuff.
Outer limit type shows.
Some of the stuff I had to cut.
You just can't.
Destination Moon, Invaders from Mars. It came from outer space. 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. This Island, Earth. Earth versus the Flying Saucers. The Incredible Shrinking Man. Journey to the Center of the Earth. Plan 9 from Outer Space is one of the worst movies ever made, but. It's actually really fun. But that's just all the 50s ones that I had to cut out. And that's not mentioning ones that I just didn't put down at all. Then we've got all the other decades that I had to cut out. And then I've got all the monster movies that had to cut out, Godzilla and all that stuff, which I love, but, you know, not a lot of people
Creature
do.
From Black Lagoon.
Yeah, that's a good one. You know, even like Frankenstein and the Invisible Man, had to cut those out. So there's just so much stuff. But I think, we got through a lot.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, the list satisfied, my job. But like I said, since you just mentioned Journey to the Center of the Earth, I love that movie. Yeah. The original.
Yeah.
In actual fact, I don't even mind a remake
The Rock
with Brendan Fraser.
The Rock was in the sequel. Yeah,
I don't mind it. It's not like attacking the senses too badly.
Yeah. I don't mind some of those fun cheesy movies. I understand they're bad, but that's okay.
I don't like the new ones because, as we discussed, it's CGI nonsense. Whereas the old ones is like when you went to the world, it was like they actually went to a jungle, or they filmed it on a soundstage with fake-looking jungle, but it looks kind of cool,
Yeah.
And then when a monster came out, it was like a guy in a suit or something,
The way it should be.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what's great about sci-fi.
Be careful, otherwise we get Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
No, that's CGI nonsense.
No, but there's a scene where there's
a snake or
Oh, with the rubber snake.
Yeah.
That was... Fuck that movie. They're making another one?
Yeah, I know.
I don't wish anyone harm, but I hope something horrible happens so they cannot make that movie. Like...
Which
like the studio
They're making Indiana Jones 5.
Oh, yeah, I read something in the paper.
85-year-old fucking Harrison Ford. Yeah, stop. We talked about this last week. Hollywood, stop.
Yeah.
Just recast him.
Just... Make a new adventure movie.
Stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
Just stop. Yeah. You could always make a type of flow movie that's similar to Indiana Jones.
They made a ton of them back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
You got your Saharas. You got your...
Well, that was early 2000s. But yeah,
Romancing the Stone.
Yeah.
Exactly. Romancing the Stone.
I mean, it's like we always talk about a lot. Actually, a lot of the movies in the 2000s section, which we'll talk about next week, I just had cut out because it's all remakes.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is not even worth talking about. They're all trash. Yeah. And that's the thing with Hollywood, just no originality.
Not anymore.
If you want to make a swashbuckling adventure Indiana Jones style movie, just make it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're getting Uncharted, but we'll see how that goes.
But that, that's a video game movie and that has its own baggage, and that, I don't think that's going to be very good. But yeah, I think we got to talk about a lot of the stuff that Dad wanted to talk about and a lot of stuff that he grew up with and then introduced to me when I was growing up, and that's probably one of the reasons I love sci-fi so much. And
some which James introduced to us.
I mean,
and then I can share it with you guys.
I mean, this is only two pages that we cut it back to, but we could have gone pages and pages. I'm going to show my age just a little bit here. On top of my viewing pleasure on all the series that we had, we also had things like epic theatre and a shitload of westerns.
Oh, yeah.
Westerns,
we had westerns coming out of our everything.
Oh, man, I love westerns as well.
That's way before Clint Eastwood even turned it into...
Oh, since the silent era,
and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, before spaghetti westerns,
spaghetti westerns,
pretty much from the silent
jumped up to a new level. It was really good.
Pretty much from the silent era till like the mid '60s, it was like westerns everywhere.
Yeah, that was like the genre.
And then like mid '60s, you had like the spaghetti western, which were like darker and more violent. And then you had like the revisionist westerns of the 70s and 80s, where it's like taking it more serious now and like taking influence from the spaghetti westerns, but now making them in America. And then they kind of died out. And now westerns are a very
and then
rare
swords
thing.
Were big in my era as well.
That's it.
There was things every Sunday called epic theatre.
Yeah, we always
show one example every week.
Yeah, we always talk about on the show. It's like they don't make epic movies like that anymore, where it's just like 1,000 extras all in like ancient Roman garb and like on a set in a location, and there's like guys with swords fighting. Like, they don't make movies, and these movies are special.
But one honourable mention I've got to add to this.
Yeah.
Jason and the Argonauts.
Oh, yeah.
That when I saw that for the first time in my life, it just blew me away and blew me away for years after that.
That skeleton fight is still impressive.
Yeah.
The fact that Ray Harryhausen did that on his own, like, amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, I got a whole bunch of Ray Harryhausen sci-fi movies I had to cut out because they're in the monster genre.
Yeah.
But they're some of my favourite movies.
They generally are, and I wouldn't usually include it with this because like I said, my aim when we first talked about this was spaceship robots and Star Wars.
I mean,
Star Wars
I guess
as the influence.
Sci-fi mainly is like spaceships and stuff like aliens, but like there's like we said, there's like such a wide-reaching different ideas. But yeah, I think we got through most of it, and we got through a lot of the movies that Dad loved and that he introduced to me and that I love. And next week we'll come back with the 90s till now and maybe talk about some of the newer movies that we grew up with and that really influenced us. I think that's it. Nathan, I think it's your turn to sign off.
Alrighty. Thank you for listening. Like and share the Tuesday Review Facebook page. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Tuesday Review AU. Follow James on Instagram at Channel Drifter, where he talks about all the movies we don't get a chance to talk about on the show. You can find all of our previous episodes on your favourite podcasting app. If you like video games, check out Sunrise Arcade, where Jake, Callum, and myself talk about video game news and reviews. You can also check out Matty J's show Car Talk, TORQUE, for your automotive discussion. Please make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the Tuesday Review on iTunes. Adios, cousins.